From friendly squad to horror story. What creepy stalkers have you met online gaming? I used to play Roblox religiously about 12 years ago. One time, my brother and I were playing on a world he had made, and some random person joined. They started talking to us, and somehow knew all of these recent details about our life. My dad's knee surgery, our cat passing away, our grandma passing, all sorts of stuff. This freaked us out really badly because we were just kids and thought that this stranger somehow knew everything about us. My mum ended up contacting Roblox to see if they could do anything, but the most they could do was tell us other accounts this person was connected to. Turns out it was our cousin who made a fake account just to scare us. It was really traumatizing at the time. All of his accounts ended up getting banned because it apparently stalked people to whatever world they joined just to annoy them and freak them out. I heard someone bothering a young-sounding player by asking them to say something, well, very adult. It went on for 3 rounds, roughly an hour. I'm a moderator in a browser game. I've only had one seriously bad interaction with a player. I warned and then banned them for an hour for some tomfoolery, so the player logged into another account to discuss it with me. That's not uncommon behavior, and I'm happy to discuss it further as long as it remains civil. And it was fine, initially. Then the guy starts getting testy and rude and agitated. Then he types my first name and some unknown surname with a question mark. Then again with a different surname. This guy's trying to figure out who I am in real life. It took me a little bit to realize what was happening, and it scared the crap out of me. I told one of the other admins, and the guy was promptly permabanned. He later told one of the admins he was only doing it to put a face to the name so he could more calmly discuss it. Even if that is true, I do not give an F. Get away from me forever. Some guy shut down the internet for the entire apartment complex I was living in at college because he got my IP address. Consoles have no security whatsoever or dedicated servers, so when you enter a game, you get the IP address of everyone there. Sometimes you can get the rough location of the house, and by doing some Google foo, you can figure out their Facebook, and the rest is history. Security is serious business. People have called police and told them they're about to shoot up the place, and the police have come in weapons hot and killed a Twitch streamer one time. Wait, what? Console games don't have dedicated servers? That's insane. Consoles in general? You'll also notice that I'm completely unsurprised that the police ran into a domestic apartment and blew up an innocent person. Sad that that's not at all implausible. I'm a female gamer, and I used my mic during an online FPS to give call-outs to my team. One guy on the team straight up threatened to R-word me in the most casual way possible, simply because I spoke and was female. I'm not gonna lie, that sounds like a Rainbow Six Siege kind of thing. I haven't had any, but my wife and I made some friends playing Halo, and she got to know them pretty well. We'd log on most nights and shoot the crap while shooting crap. One day, while she was playing with one of these guys, they start talking about relationships and stuff, as well as their bedroom lives. To my wife, it doesn't seem like a weird conversation. The guy does say he's lonely because he's been single for a while, but generally speaking, they're not really saying anything inappropriate or particularly dirty. A little while later, he confesses to her that he whacked the mule while she was talking and asked if that bothered her. Her initial reaction was that it was a bit weird, but she sympathized with him and wasn't going to hold it against him. But a few hours later, when I got home from work, she had really started to be bothered by it and wanted to unfriend and block the guy, but also felt bad about it because she didn't really feel justified, especially since she had already sort of forgiven him, but she didn't feel comfortable with the idea of talking to him again. After agonizing about it for a while, she decided to block him and try to forget about it. I think that day we both learned that you really do have to curate your online experience, and there's no reason not to cut ties with people who cross a line. You don't owe these people anything. But it was really weird how this guy kind of violated her trust, and she still somehow felt like the bad guy for not wanting to be his friend anymore. Okay, so when I was playing Minecraft with some friends, I offhandedly mentioned that I was hungry. One guy who I didn't know but seemed relatively normal at the time said, "A pizza is on its way to your house." I immediately checked back in chat because I didn't remember typing up my address, let alone giving it to someone I didn't know personally. I acted normal and kept playing. 30 minutes later, a pizza arrived at my door, already paid for. I immediately told all of my friends to watch out for him since he had somehow gotten my address. I have not heard or spoken to him in a couple of years. However, I'm still somewhat cautious about giving out any information that may pin down my location. This one guy claimed to be an adult film star, kept joining all of my StarCraft games, asking questions he shouldn't have been asking a 14-year-old boy. This went on for a few days until, if I remember right, I changed my Battle.net tag to dodge the creepy old weirdo for good. Heard weapon shots, then a couple of guys arguing, and then silence. Then the player was kicked for inactivity. We couldn't call the cops, we didn't even know where to start. They could have been anywhere in the US or Canada. Also, I was like 14, so I was just mad about the loud noises and didn't even process what I'd heard until like an hour later. For others' future reference, often the best thing to do in this situation is contact the company that runs the game. They'll usually put a bit of effort in to try and use the person's PII to try and contact the local authorities. Not really a creepy encounter per se, but certainly a life-changing one. When I was playing Rocket League on Xbox over voice chat, the guy I was playing, who sounded like he was between 17 to 18 years old, started just cussing me out before I even hit the ball. I just assumed he was having a really bad day, so I went about the game and ended up winning. This guy got really upset, and I mean real upset. He started crying, and I kind of felt bad, so I invited him to my party to see what was going on with him. I had a really long, deep chat that lasted a few hours with this stranger about how he was getting bullied, like brutally bullied, and how his parents practically kicked him out of the family. I tried to make him feel better, but he couldn't stop crying when I heard a weapon shot. My heart sank. I thought this guy had just ended things, but he didn't. He said that his thoughts were extremely dark, and ending things felt like the best option, but said that talking to me made him feel the tiniest bit better just to stop himself from doing the unthinkable. That made me cry, so now we were both crying. I friended him and we talked every day until things started getting brighter for him. I told him to talk to his family and try to straighten things out, and it worked. He left his headset on so I could hear the whole 3 hours of him making up with his family, and he moved school where he made better friends who are really nice people. I ended up friending them too. As a thank you to me for stopping him from cutting life's great journey short, he offered to buy me something, but I rejected his offer. I didn't help him for material gain, I helped him so that he'd make it to his adult life. That got really emotional for me just typing that, but that was my weirdest, yet best encounter with a person online. I play a female character in World of Warcraft because the male Pandaren are goofy looking and I wasn't going to play another race for a monk, obviously. And the flirting. Oh god, the flirting. Listen, most female avatars are just male players. That goes for any game. Secondly, nobody's going to marry some night elf they met at a random battleground, especially one who refers to them as "m'lady" and tries to heal them instead of their dying teammates. Yeah, the worst experience was by far trying to win a game while some man kept flirting and neglecting from doing any real healing. Keep that crap in Moonguard, man. Come play Helldivers with us. At the time of writing, the community is still about 80% non-toxic. Although I am writing this prior to the game becoming available on Xbox, so we'll see how it goes once the Halo crowd jump on board. Oh, come on, you Microsoft jockeys. I'm just yanking your freedom organ. Not sure if I'd say creepy, but definitely weird. A few years back when GTA first came out, I had a group of friends I played with daily. One day we match-made for some death matches or races or something, I don't remember, but we decided to invite the people we matched with to an Xbox Live party. We all played for a few hours, added each other, and then went to bed. The next day, when I got online, one of the guys from the session invited me to a party the moment I turned my Xbox on. I joined, and at first he was cool, but then he started talking to his wife and kids while playing. You could definitely tell nobody was there, as his mic picked up every little sound, even just the sound of him moving his analog sticks. There were no other voices coming in through the headset. He then thanked his wife for making him something to eat, and then started smacking his lips and making very fake eating sounds. I ended up asking if I could say hi to his wife or one of his kids, and he got real defensive and made a bunch of excuses like, they just went out to the store, Oh, but you were just talking about what to make for dinner not 15 seconds ago. I called him out and he just left the party. Never heard from him again. I got called by my real name. Nobody on that server had any business knowing it. I was not playing with my friends. I had the same thing. I have no idea how they figured it out. They also said they were going to come get me, which made it even worse. Oh, I frickin' got this. Was playing the original Rust. It was middle of the night in the game, and on one of the builds where night was frickin' pitch black. I was in this small network of abandoned houses, about 4 stories up, when I hear something. I also notice there's a fire in one of the top rooms. Frickin' A. I go up there, and as I enter the room, it's just this guy sitting there on his own, undressed, chanting in Latin very slowly. What the frick? So I watch him for a bit, and he's got his back turned to me. He can't know I'm there. Suddenly, the fire goes out, and I feel like I'm suddenly surrounded by noise and screaming, and something's attacking me because I'm taking damage. The sound of firearm shots, screaming, static, high-pitched noises, absolute chaos, and then suddenly, it's over. The guy is gone, his fire is gone, sound is gone, deathly silent. I look around and I don't even find any evidence that he was there to begin with. Gosh darn frick everything about that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Some random guy came into my Counter-Strike Go game. He started typing out addresses in the chats of people, and he typed out mine. Creepy as heck. So when I was 13, me and my friend were playing the newly released COD. I think it was Modern Warfare 2. We were killing this guy over and over again with explosives, and he got really mad and started cursing at us in the post-game lobby. We found this funny and cursed him back, but at that time our English was pretty bad, so we used our native language. He just stopped for a moment. He laid down his headset and we heard a set of voices in the background. When he came back, he told me my full address and name and that he was going to beat me up. All of that in my native language. We obviously freaked out and we were even thinking of calling the cops, but it turned out he was a friend of my friend's brother and he recognized my gamer tag. A while back I was playing Roblox. I still do that sometimes, not as much these days. And I'd joined a town roleplay game. There are many of those, I don't remember which one. I was just messing around, driving around town and stuff when a person started asking another person for personal information, like their name, the state they live in, stuff like that. They started giving their personal info to this dude, and he began to make really creepy, perverted remarks. At that moment, I wanted no part in it, and I left. Female gamer here, so I've encountered almost all kinds of creeps. One of the most memorable was a guy who we'll call Kevin, who played a few games of Modern Warfare 3 with me and a couple of friends. Kevin became so infatuated by the sound of my voice that he wouldn't play with our group unless I was there and actively talking. Eventually, he wanted to play games with only me and nobody else. I had a bad feeling about that, so I never joined him. He private messaged me, hoping that I'd join a private chat. When I refused, Kevin became desperate. Any game I was playing by myself, he wanted to join. When I logged onto my console, he'd message me almost immediately. He wanted to hear my voice on the mic so badly that he even offered to buy me some online games if I talked to him for a few minutes. He got upset when I refused him again. His attitude changed and he turned into a huge butthole. All of a sudden, me being his hopeful love interest was demoted to different words for women who do things for money, occasionally punctuated by the correct term for a female dog. Kevin realized that his little plan had backfired when I wasn't caving to his breakdown, and then he begged for me to send him a voice message of myself moaning in a certain way. I told him off and blocked him. These people, man. First they seem to message girls promising money or goods in return for certain favors, and then when girls refuse to do that, they then call them working girls and other insults implying that they take money or goods in return for certain favors. The dissonance is real, man. And why is it always the Kevins? I know that was an example name, but if you know, you know. Once upon a time, while playing Duck Game, I got into a lobby with 4 people. One of them left after 2 rounds, and there was only me, the host, and that player that I'll be talking about. It was a standard match, nothing out of the bounds of normality until, well, let's say that the guy we're talking about didn't play at all. He was just standing in place and writing strange messages, some of which I'll describe later. He had a dinosaur hat and did nothing but tell strange things in the chat. He said anything he could say. He talked about some stories that his grandmother had told him. He talked about a man who stole his father's car. I can clearly remember the message that caught me the most off guard out of all the things he wrote. A man stole my father's car, my family was in grief because we cannot get other car. It seems like he was poor and a bit illiterate. But not to worry, this man will never steal cars from other people ever again. He met him. When the match ended, he said that his grandmother told him that the end was nigh and everything would soon be okay, nothing to worry about. And then he left. I was concerned about his words, stunned, and I met him later that day in another lobby. I asked what he was talking about the last time we'd met. Here's just a string of his messages. Yes, you are right. The end is coming. My grandmother never lies. 27th of November. Soon my words will come true. And with that, I will eradicate from current existence. And then the guy left the lobby. That was by far the most creepy encounter of mine. Multiple years ago by now, but I still freak out every November 27th. I befriended a guy in Neverwinter when I was in high school, and I played daily with a great guild. He was a little weird and he tried to hit on me, but I shut it down mostly since I wasn't interested and also had a boyfriend. He ended up joining my guild, and after making moves on me again, and me telling him to stop again, or that would be the end of our friendship, he finally quietened down. We were in different channels. This was TeamSpeak 3, and I got a message from someone that he was popping off in the main channel about how I was a terrible person, with the usual suite of comments used against female players. Just a huge rant in text about how I should be kicked from the guild, and my friends shouldn't talk to me anymore. At this point, he'd been there for maybe 2 weeks, and I'd been there for almost a year. I got screenshots, and 2 other people also got them. Within 10 minutes, during which he ranted the entire time, he got permanently removed from the guild and was blocked by most people online. I was 12 or 13 at the time, playing RuneScape in the early mid-2000s. Always used a guy avatar. I'm a girl, by the way. This low-level lady avatar asked me for some bronze armor, and I was like, okay, and I even smithed some weapons for her too. Then she says, let's go to bed, and I was like, nope, and I logged out. I said on microphone, ugh, that idiot shottied me before I could see him. Random guy then chimes in, I'd shotty you in the butt, baby. It sounded like a 12-year-old. I laughed, muted him, and went on with my game. The creepy part was when he messaged me a 4-hour paragraph-long fanfiction of us doing the deed, including him shottying my butt with his 12-inch mega dong. Kids these days are special kind of crazy sometimes. Obviously, I reported him and went on with my day, but what the frick, dude? I just wanted to murder virtual people for a few hours in peace. So this one dark, stormy night on Ark Survival Evolved, me, along with 2 others, settled in a stone home with no door. One of my friends had a pistol with 4 rounds. We heard a noise outside, we were in the jungle in pitch darkness, and my friend takes a look outside, and all I could see was the flashes of small arms fire, and then his mic went silent. My second friend tried to run, but fell off a cliff. I ran outside and proned in a bush, and the lightning from the storm showed me the monster trying to kill us. It was a tall, skinny black character with a spear and no clothing. We decided to go on another game later that day. So I play PUBG Mobile, which has voice chat as we all know. So I load up squads and we're playing, and I'm talking and communicating with everyone on my team, apart from this one guy whose mic is just buzzing static. Well, it's the bottom of the match and we've almost won when we get cornered in a house. So as we're shooting and covering this guy, his mic spits into life and the static stopped. All I hear is, watch where you point that, and then a boom, before this guy's character just stops moving. Well, we lost the round, but I can't help but wonder what the frick happened. I mean, it was probably him just dropping the mic, right? Yeah, that's what happened. I mean, I know that there's a real serious implication here, but it does seem equally or more likely to me that it was a prank or something on you guys. I really hope so. Also love that even with this possibility of an actual life team member death, you just kept playing. Maybe I would have done the same. When playing GTA with a friend, a random person connected to our room. As soon as the audio of his mic came through, it was just a kid and he was saying the phrase, I hate N-words, plural, over and over again as far as he could without taking a breath. He did this for the entire round until we finished our race and then disconnected. At no point did he stop repeating this phrase in deathly serious, matter-of-fact tone. Girl. I legit was part of a group of gamers on console. We'd play Overwatch ranked together and it was great. And then one day they all decided to joke around about needing to see a picture of my chest in order for me to game with them. They were all guys too. I joked around and told them to eat doo-doo. They removed me from the group and from their friends list. I'm in my mid to late 20s and a survivor of the unspeakable act, and it's still one of the most demoralizing and dehumanizing experiences. My first time, I played Rust. I managed to not get killed just long enough to make a basic tool and build a crappy wooden hut with just enough space for one person. Well, this took me like 25 minutes or so, and as I went in, I forgot to lock this door, and this other player with clothes and a weapon just opened my door. He stands there staring at me. I'm thinking like, I'm dead, and I just stood there waiting for him to do the inevitable. He stands there for like 1 minute staring at me, and I just don't move. Then he just turns around and walks off, leaving me alive. No doubt that he had too much pity to kill me. I once made a female character in an MMO. Obviously, I gave her a female name too. Over the week or so that I played her, I must have got more than 30 messages from random guys. Everything from, hey, you need help with anything? 5 or 6 times, which I never got as a male character by the way, to, hey babe, to, oh my god, you're so hot, you wanna play? There were even 1 or 2 messages that were a little more lewd than that I can't post here. I've heard female gamers talk about things like this, but I always assumed they were exaggerating a little. It genuinely creeped me out to see the other side of it. I was playing Fortnite and some guy was on the mic crying while I heard whispering in the background. It scared the absolute heck out of me. There was also a weird crackling sound like fire, so I just dipped out in fear. What happened on a first date that made you decide, you know what, actually, I'm good? He used his pocket knife to cut me a slice of cake, and then later scraped some dirt clumps off his shoe with the same knife. I asked him if he ever cleaned his knife, and he replied, no, why? He also confessed he was madly in love with me the same day. We'd just met. One time I took this girl to dinner and she could not stop staring at our waiter. I'll grant her one thing. I'm a guy and I can admit this guy was probably hot for anyone who prefers men. Square-jawed and muscled college athlete type, I get it. But I did not appreciate the fact that she literally craned her neck every time the kitchen door swung open to see if he was walking out. Eventually, I gave her enough cash to pay for my part of the meal, told her I'd noticed, as though I couldn't have, suggested to her that she could get his contact info when she paid the bill, and then left. You wingmaned another bro on your own date? The next Bro Awards will feature you. He got us pulled over. The car was searched and he had a brick of some hardcore substances in the trunk. I almost got arrested. He finally vouched that this was a blind date and I was innocent. I mean, sounds like even if you wanted to, there couldn't have been a second date. He tried to change my order with the waitress because I didn't order what he'd recommended. Met a girl at a friend's party. We were both in our mid-20s, ended up spending 3 hours talking, and she was so funny, charming, gorgeous, and carefree. I asked her out and got a wonderful, I would love to, from her. I showed up about 4 days later at the restaurant she'd picked, one within walking distance of her place. She arrived 5 minutes later. Nice place, I say, as I get the chair out for her. Since it's so close, do you eat here often? She scowls and responds, you know, you ask too many fricking questions. I was floored. Everything continued downhill from there. Within about 20 minutes, she just got up and left. I felt as if she had failed to tell me the other night that she had an evil twin, and that's who showed up this evening. Later, when I ran into my buddy, I asked what the heck was up. Oh yeah, he said, she's a piece of work until she gets a few drinks in her. Then she's adorable. Thanks. Thanks a lot, buddy. I bet she's an alcoholic. She probably feels crummy as frick when she's sober. As a former alcoholic, this was my first thought too. Okay, well I was going to say that she was the opposite of most of us, who frequently turn into complete belligerent jerks when we drink, and say or do things we regret, but these last two commenters gave me some valuable insight. I hope she got to work on herself. Went to dinner with a girl who I'd been crushing on for quite some time. It seemed to be going well, and we ended up back at her place watching a movie or something. Out of nowhere, her boyfriend, of whose existence I was not aware, came back from out of town and stopped in unexpectedly. He and I had a super awkward conversation for a few minutes, and then the two of them disappeared into the other room for a minute or two. She came back and said something to the effect of, I don't have a place for you, I'm sorry. I just kind of got in my car and drove home with one of the strangest feelings I'd ever felt. At some point, a few minutes into the journey, I couldn't contain myself and busted out laughing. I met a girl on a dating app way back in the day, and we ended up playing pool with her sister. About an hour in, my date starts chatting up a guy at the pool hall that she apparently knew. They disappear for a bit, and the sister comes up to me and sticks her tongue in my mouth. I leave and go to tell my date this isn't going to work, and she's outside making out with a dude she was talking to. To this day, I don't know if the sister trying to make out with me was to cover for her. Ugh. The guy told me he'd still be together with his kid's mum if she had apologized for what she did wrong. Out of curiosity, I asked what she did wrong. I was expecting something like she cheated. You know, something that actually needed apologizing for. Nope. Apparently she kept nagging one day and wouldn't shut up, so he tied her to a computer chair and went out for 3 hours and left her. I said it doesn't sound like she was the one who needed to apologize, and then I left. 2 times. There was Farmer Dude, who added me on MySpace. I'm showing my age here. We chatted a while. I can appreciate a country boy. Seemed pleasant. Went to meet at McDonald's. Okay, sure, I'm not that hard to please, let's get some Big Macs and chat. We talked for about 10 minutes and clearly it wasn't going to work. He was almost completely silent. Wouldn't ask questions, wouldn't eat, just sat there. I told him it was nice to meet him, but I had to go home. Later that night I got about 20 messages telling me exactly what he was into in the bedroom and how he wanted me to come over and throw up that Mac sauce all over his junk. Yeah, that's a block from me. Then there was Counting Crows Dude. I met the guy on a Counting Crows online forum, again, showing my age, and he happened to live half an hour away. Sure, let's grab drinks at a local bar and see where it goes. I get there, can't find him anywhere, figured I was stood up, and then the lights dimmed and he walked out on stage, drunk as all heck, slurring every other word, and proceeded to play "Round Here," and stopped halfway through to chuck up on himself. Now I can never hear that song without cracking up. Maria came from Nashville with a suitcase in her... It's odd that both incidents involved hurling to some degree. He took it out. And I don't mean this in a funny, unexpected Seinfeld kind of way, although I suppose it is that. I mean, he leaned across the table and whispered, "I'm out." I said, "Excuse me?" For some reason, my first thought was out of the closet. He said, "Out, under the table. Look under the table." And like an idiot, I looked. Then he said, "That's what you do to me." I said, "And this is what you do to me," and I left. I'm a people pleaser, so to this day I'm proud of myself for walking away in the middle of dinner. She took her hands off the wheel and said, "You think I'm crazy?" I literally jumped out at the next light. Oh, this story is always fun to tell. Basically, we got back to her place after dinner and we were starting to have some fun on the couch. As things started escalating, she pulls out a giant glass jar, like the ones with the finger loop thing that pirates put rum in, half full of clear liquid. My dumb idiot self asked her if it was moonshine or vodka or something, and then she proceeded to explain that it was pure GHB and that she has a thing about getting wasted off it before doing the deed. And she said that with a completely serious face. For those of you who don't know, GHB is a substance frequently used by those trying to perform the unspeakable act on dates. She then went to the restroom and I noped out of there so fast that I practically levitated off the couch. Never spoke to her again. I picked her up and she asked me if we could stop by her mum's house so she could run in and grab something. I said sure. Made the stop. She went inside. 5 minutes later, she comes out hustling towards the car with a car seat and her mum chasing her, yelling. She opens the car door, throws in the car seat, which I now see has a baby in it, and starts yelling at me to drive. I freaked out and just turned my car off and took the keys out of the ignition. Her mum called the cops and they came and questioned all of us for a good while. Turns out she had lost custody due to substance use and was trying to use me as a way to get her kid back. We never made it to dinner and I just went home after the cops left. Wow, I've heard people going on dates for free meals or to make someone jealous. I've never heard of someone taking someone on a date to act as a getaway driver while they acted in contempt of court, though. So well done on getting that rare achievement. Your Steam profile will update with it soon. Happened to my sister, but they found out the guy had the same uncommon last name as her. Then when she asked where he was from, it was from the same small town that our great-grandparents are from. They awkwardly laughed and just immediately ended the date. She kept writing to her friends on WhatsApp a play-by-play of the date instead of listening to me. So I stood up, paid for my dinner, and left because I found it disrespectful as frick. I met this girl on the apps, and we're talking and she invites me over hours after matching. Alright, sure, things are alright through text. Her mum's there and is messed up, like mixing painkillers and alcohol messed up. She's at the table just mumbling and dozing off and asking me effed up stuff. Then her sister and sister's boyfriends are there and they're drunk and having a screaming match fight while we're all just talking and hanging out at the table. The girl I'm on the date with seemed more normal than the other three, and most of the time she's talking about her 9 or 10-year-old daughter, and is complaining about how she lives in another state and how she's never had custody of her, and complaining about how we lived in a screwed-up state that always gives custody to the fathers. Which is a lie. I live in Colorado and I never meet any divorced dads with full custody unless the mum straight up left, and even lived with my mum after my parents divorced, when I would have been better off with my dad. So I leave and she asks me, how about a second date? And I tell her, sorry to be blunt, but that was a crap show and I was very uncomfortable and I don't think we'll align. She goes off on me about how everyone has a crazy mum, I'm normal, and how drunk people fight, it's what they do. And then finally, and here's the clincher, how I sound like Child Protection Services and that I was a freaking weirdo, and started hurling insults at me, and then said I should have disclosed my medical condition. I have no clue what she was talking about. It didn't need to be like that. I would have picked her up, taken her to dinner and a movie or walk or literally anything. But nope, she straight up told me to come to her house with her substanced-up mum, drunk sister, and boyfriend with zero warning. Ooh, mine's a bit fresh. I was asked when I'd get a real career. I love what I do. I'm a union stagehand in a major entertainment city. I've been in my industry for over 20 years, toured the country, toured the world, and make a comfortable living. Yeah, no, that's pretty demeaning, and I'm out. He told me that he'd been kicked out of his church for being caught in bed with someone underaged, but reassured me that it totally wasn't what it looked like. Her kid called me daddy. Told me that aliens cause jet lag and that I've the ghost of a fisherman following me around named Samuel, on top of the other 20 bat crap things she said at dinner. This was last night, by the way. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. He just kept making a weird amount of jokes about tapeworms. Also, this happened while we were eating sushi, just in case anyone was wondering. She clicked her fingers at the waitress, stunning but vapid as frick. He insisted on paying for our dinner instead of going Dutch, and then totally stiffed the server. I tried to leave a tip and he got angry at me because he was paying and it was his decision to tip or not. Ooh, I have a wee collection from the lads I've dated over the years. He tried to force a kiss. Another who tried to get me to marry him the next week. No, he wasn't an immigrant. Another who said women were stupid and would believe anything he told them. I'm a woman, man. One who said it was okay to drown puppies and it was actually humane. And then there was the guy who swore that it was impossible to get acquired immunodeficiency syndrome if he was straight. I found out a week later that he knew the whole time he was human immunodeficiency virus positive. That's just some of them. There are various different men throughout my lifetime, and in no particular order, I was just writing them down as they came to mind. Can't believe I nearly forgot that last guy. Scariest of them all. He tried way too hard to get me to go home with him. I'm glad common sense won out that day. I was 16 and he was 18. He referred to every woman as the C word, and we aren't in a country where that's common and harmless. His ex was apparently a C word, his aunt was a bunt, some random author he was telling me about for some reason was also a shunt, stuff like that. The C word doesn't really bother me, but the way he said it was very gendered and angry. After that, he decided to argue with me about sports and politics and berate me for my choices in those areas. No need for a second date after that. That guy was a funt. Being told off the bat that the welts on my crotch aren't contagious really put me off them. I went on a date with a woman from the office. I thought we had good chemistry and got along well. She couldn't find her phone, so I tried calling it, and someone from the restaurant answered. I went back in for her to get it, and the waiter showed me I was saved in her contacts under free food. I guess I'll repost this here. She kept talking about the emergency eggplants she had stashed around the city. She was like, I've been really busy with grad school, but I don't go without. I have plenty of emergency sausage around town, if you know what I mean. And when I say she kept going on, I mean she kept going on. She was telling me about the 2 guys downtown, 3 in the suburbs, 1 near campus, and 2 in her apartment complex. It honestly sounded like I was new to town, and she was giving me a rundown of all the best places to visit. It was just weird. I was newly out, and I had a crush on her for ages, so when she asked me out, I was so excited. She was pretty, smart, very laid back, and had a great sense of humor, so things were going great initially. End of the date comes around and she very casually drops the bomb on me that she's involved in an open investigation for vehicular manslaughter. She even hinted that it was purposeful and didn't seem to regret anything. That was the end of that. Ow! I think I just experienced sympathetic conversational whiplash for you. My goodness, I can't imagine going from being stoked that your crush asked you out to suddenly going, oh, they killed someone and may have done it intentionally. Lordy lord. I met her parents on the first date and she was terrified of me. Most awkward date ever. He said nothing. I get that he was nervous, but I was engaging. I asked questions that should have led to at least a few sentences of conversation, but no, one-word answers for everything. It was dinner and a movie, so our only opportunity to talk was dinner. It was like pulling teeth. No thanks, no second date. Nothing obvious or overt, but from the minute we sat down to eat, the hair on the back of my neck stood up and I felt unsafe. He was polite, listened, very polished, but I just couldn't shake that feeling. I drove to the restaurant to meet, so he didn't know where I lived. After dinner, he asked for another date and I just said, no, I don't think we're a good match. I gave him money to pay for my half, said goodbye, and when I got to the door, I turned around and he was staring at me with an expression I never hoped to see again. I ran to my car, moved it to another spot, and waited until he left before I left, so he couldn't follow. The restaurant was on an isolated road, so that was safer than having him catch up to me. Found out about a year later he was sent to prison for the unspeakable act against 2 different women. It happened on first dates. Never used a dating site again. Trust your instincts, ladies. It was my first date. I was 17 and worked as an office assistant's helper. The guy, who was 20, also worked there. I don't remember what his job title was. He asked me to a drive-in movie. He came to the house and met my mum, did the whole song and dance to her about taking good care of me, get me home on time, all that crap. I was still nervous though, so I arranged with 2 friends to go to the same movie in their car. My date didn't know about them. They parked 3 cars down from us. After we parked, the guy is telling me to relax. He just wanted company for the movie. He respected me. So I'm thinking, cool. The movie started. I don't think the opening credits had finished and he was all over me. It was like he grew 4 extra arms in seconds. I pushed him off me and said, "What the frick?" He apologized and said he was sorry. He thought I'd like it and he couldn't help himself because I was so cute or whatever. I told him I didn't like it and to keep his hands to himself. I get maybe 2 drinks of my soda down and he tries again. Now I'm angry. I get out of the car, throw my drink at him and walk off. I go to my friend's car and get in. The guy didn't see where I went because he was dealing with dripping soda on him and his car. My friends and I left. The following Monday at work was really awkward and he avoided me like the plague. This is why to this day I've never again dated anyone I've worked with. She asked me if I could clean her pet rat cage or hold the rat while she cleaned it. Also listed a number of handyman tasks she needed me to tackle. The girl who spent the first half of the dinner date talking about her irritable bowel syndrome and then switched to her love for God after the main course. She looked nothing like her photos, smelled of cat pee-covered taquitos. We were at the park and saw some girls playing softball and she said, "Those girls look like special ed with those helmets." Like, frick. I'm always down to give someone a chance, but just yikes. I made an excuse to leave. My car smelled for like 2 days after that. He threw a temper tantrum because the restaurant he wanted to go to was closed due to the tropical storm that was going on. Sad, because I was having a great time walking around Manhattan while the storm raged. I had every intention of going home with him until that tantrum. She wouldn't stop going on and on about how much she wanted a baby, called it her little creation and how she wanted multiple, tried to convince me to come back to her place for some fun. I dropped her off and dipped right away. She texted me every now and then afterwards, trying to meet up again. Hell no. We went to her place to watch movies and we chose Kung Fu Panda 2. From the moment it began, she proceeded to cackle at every single joke. Anything that could even be perceived as mildly funny set her off like the Wicked Witch of the West. I know some people have interesting laughs, and it wouldn't have been so bad if it wasn't constant from beginning to end. After that, she put on Iron Man and same thing, witch cackling the entire movie. There's a point in the movie where a character's phone goes off and the ringtone is an old Iron Man theme, which made me chuckle, at which she turned to me and says, "You laugh at all the weirdest parts." The second the movie was over, I got out of there and didn't see her again. I hold out hope that her saying that was some kind of self-aware joke, but then again I do get the admittedly shallow urge to run when someone laughs constantly and in an unattractive way. I'm not proud of it, but it is a whole thing. The date felt more like a job interview to fill a position rather than an actual date. He gave off a vibe of someone who wasn't into getting to know me as a person, but just listed his wants and needs. So at the end of the date, he asked me how I thought it went, and I said I didn't feel a click or a match. And he said, yeah, he was missing the wow factor. So I laughed my butt off, slightly offended, in the car on my way home. Gosh, I had no idea I was auditioning for a contest. I was happy we only went out for drinks, but even that felt a bit too long. Took her to dinner and then took her to a late-night car meet. Upon arriving to the meet, she started crap with several other girls she had beef with at her school, and she hasn't talked to me since high school. We were well into our 20s, she was even older than me. I don't get how some people make high school beef their entire personality for years. Oh, just so many. But I'll say the one where the guy was kind and polite, but wanted to move way too fast. I'm not talking about bedroom stuff. Grabbed my chin and tried to turn my head for a kiss while we were watching a movie. It was Surrogates with Bruce Willis, if you're wondering. He didn't try again after I pulled away, though. He also mentioned he should get to know the state where I grew up and where my family lived since he'd be meeting them soon. He'd also catfished with a pic of his older brother, which was sad to me since he was really cute himself. He insisted on walking me to my car. I'd parked near the attendant in a garage. Glad I made that decision, and while I was getting in, he asked if he could tell his mum he had a girlfriend. We were both in our early 20s, by the way. Poor guy. Since he was just over-enthusiastic and not an outright creep or jerk, I did email him telling him why there wouldn't be a second date, saying he came on too strong, but I wished him well. I hope he found someone. I also kind of wondered if it was a cultural thing I wasn't aware of. He was Indian, but I can't say either way. One time I went on a date with a girl, and during the date, she started talking about future plans with me. She was talking about how we're going to have kids together and how we're going to go on trips with my brother and his wife. I was in my mid-20s and I'd just started my career when this happened, so of course this freaked me out. Who jumps to those kinds of conclusions during the first date? It was super awkward because she worked with my mum and kept asking about me. What was it like on your first night as a homeless person? I was about 9 years old and my mum said we were going on a camping trip. I didn't really suspect anything as it was summertime and we went camping a lot when I was younger, although I did wonder why we were packing so much stuff. After a few weeks of camping, I started to complain, but my mum insisted that it was good for us to get in touch with nature, stuff like that. Then school started and we were still camping, and we kept camping for another 6 months. When we finally got a house, my mum cried with joy, and we don't camp anymore. To me, that reads as your mother trying to protect you as best as she could and keep things positive for you, staying strong in the face of terrible circumstances. Good for her. I remember being really hungry and acting weird because of the low blood sugar, almost delirious. This was when I made a futile attempt to run away from an awful home situation with no money. I ended up going back because of that. I was 13 when my parents kicked me out and told me that they no longer wanted anything to do with me. I was terrified to visit a shelter because I'd known some foster kids and the whole system scared me, plus I wanted to continue going to the same school. I didn't want to lose my friends either. The scariest part at that age was really just finding out what I was hoping to eat. There had been a dilapidated trailer just minutes down the road from my dad's place, so I stayed in that. I don't think it really hit me until I had to choose one night between food and blankets because the temperature was expected to drop down into the mid-30s, and I only had one somewhat thin blanket at that point. The next day, I put on my best attire, which was nothing impressive, and asked for a job at Long John Silver's. I lied and told them I was 15, and I worked 5 days a week rushing over after school. I ate more unhealthy than I have since to save money for some form of shelter, which came in the form of a '91 Toyota Camry that I purchased out of the thrifty nickel for $300. I loved that clunker, plus heating myself was much easier in it. From there, it was mostly uphill. I found an older lady willing to rent me her garage without any sort of credit check. Took a couch off the side of the road to sleep on. I even had internet in there, where I mostly read scary stories all night. I wish video streaming services had been a thing back then. I just kinda learned to roll with the punches. My childhood wasn't normal. It was downright terrifying a good chunk of the time, but it is what made me who I am today. I don't know that I could deal with that situation now as a grown man. It's downright impressive that you managed to survive, but also progressively better your situation. Well done. Also, the fact that it's implied that you finished school like this is a whole extra level of wow. I was homeless for a couple of months a year or so ago. I had a car and a low-paying job, so I lived in the woods in a tent for a bit. The first night was miserable. I ended up sleeping really uncomfortably in the passenger seat of my car, and it was a really cold night. After that, I got a tent and slept on an old climbing pad I had. The first night was hell, but the next several weeks were actually not so bad. I had a spot in the woods where I was well hidden and I could cook over a fire. I really didn't have it that bad, but it gave me quite a bit of sympathy for people who really do end up on the streets in much more desperate situations. Stuff is not easy. I was only homeless for about 6 weeks at 36 years of age. After several years of depression and anxiety slowly eroding my resources, relationships, and general will to try anymore, I ended up having a final blowout with my girlfriend, who reasonably couldn't handle me anymore. I started sleeping at work, which wasn't even a full-time job. The delicate part was not getting caught, and the freedom from the extremely unhealthy state my relationship had been in kept my mind away from the absolute abject terror that was hiding beneath the surface. The scary part of homelessness for me was the growing sense that if I fell any further, I'd probably never get back up. It takes resources to be clean, fed, and rested, and if you aren't those things, it's very hard to get the resources, let alone find the will to try. But that first night was all triage, all focused on trying to be sure the second night wasn't going to be on the street. I pulled it off for 6 weeks, and that time actually saved my life. I was away from conflict, intimately connected to how dire my circumstances had become, and forced into a very regular schedule. Routine is really good for me, but nigh impossible in a depressive state. I was without bills, was able to save enough for a damage deposit and rent. I still struggle with depression in a pretty serious way, but the animal terror of having nowhere and no one really seared itself into me. A better motivation would be the future I want rather than the future I fear. But as it stands, I at least have a motivator strong enough to escape the incredible gravity of mental illness. Sleeping in my car wasn't that bad. It was summer, so it was pretty warm, which was my biggest issue. I showered in the gym, spent most of my day at the library before going to work. For the first few nights, it wasn't bad. However, one night, police found me sleeping in my car and escorted me to the local homeless shelter, which was one of the most terrifying nights of my life. While I was there, laying in a bunk bed, a huge argument broke out because one guy broke out some crystal, wouldn't share it with a second guy, and then a third guy got angry and started screaming at them to be quiet because he needed to sleep. Since this is coming up a lot, people keep asking how it was legal that the police escorted me to the shelter. I don't know the legality of the issue. What I can say is I was woken up by a knock on my window to see 4 cops, 2 cop cars, and they were shining those super bright flashlights through my windows at me, and I didn't even think of arguing with them. When you're a teenager, it seems kind of cool to sleep in a car, on the couch or floor of a friend or acquaintance, or for your dad to scam a rented apartment for a month or 2 without paying for it. Moving around every few months, carrying everything you can in an old Honda Civic, seemed like an adventure. We once moved a couch across town in it. We must have looked like a couple of idiots. Once, after a few months of staying in a place where we had no furniture, were sleeping on the floor, the carpet of which was so flea-infested you could literally see the fleas hopping around, the landlord got so frustrated with us basically squatting in his property that my dad had promised to pay and never did, that the landlord removed the front door. We went out to scam some food from somewhere and came back to find no front door, which in retrospect is a pretty awesome way to get someone out of your property. One of the ways we scammed food would be to go to the breakfast buffet at a fancy hotel, tell the server we had a room there, eat a ton of food and just walk out. If you go to a basic place like a Motel 6 with the waffle maker and everything, and no one's working there besides someone at the front desk and someone coming around cleaning, it's pretty easy. But do remember that you're stealing and you can get in trouble for it. This was also kind of fun, but looking back, it is kind of a messed up way for a dad to treat his teenage kid. Slept in my vehicle, couch surfed with a friend, squatted in an unused trailer, all while still working at Walmart. Saved enough to get a crappy apartment and just kept going from there. First night, my wife and I ended up sleeping outside. We slept in a local park that I knew about. We'd come down from the countryside with a few rands, enough for a meal maybe, and hoped to stay with a friend. He was unable to give us a place to stay, so we had to sleep outside. After the insecurity of that first night, I told my wife that we had to find a safer place to sleep, so we climbed up the slopes of Table Mountain, about a 1-hour walk away, and found an obscured spot amongst some bushes and trees. We cleared that out with sticks and rocks, made it a bit habitable, and then went to the city looking for work. We'd spend the day going from one place to the next, looking for work until it started growing dark. Then we'd head up the mountain to our little spot for the night. Did that daily for a month until we were able to secure a small shack room in the townships, where we stayed for another few months until I got a job offer. It was my wife's temp waitering jobs that kept us fed while I was looking for work. Biggest challenge was mental, keeping focused, clean, looking presentable, and just making my job to be looking for a job. There have been times in my life where I've struggled to find literally any job from the comfort of my little apartment with working hot water and electricity for months on end. I do not know how you did this from your car or tent, and hats off to you for your relationship surviving this. Clearly a testament to your strength as a couple. I slept in a near-empty garage block, put blankets over my front and rear seats like a tent, and had a duvet to keep me warm. I was absolutely fine until I woke up in the morning and had a wee behind my car, and noticed the white van next to me had an electric plug in it. Someone was sleeping in the van. I slept there a few more times, kinda creepy, but it also kinda made me feel safer too. It was terrifying and cold and hungry. I didn't sleep a wink, I adapted over time. Extremely steep learning curve to surviving homelessness, nothing really prepares you for it. It wasn't awful until it sunk in that it wasn't going to change anytime soon. At first it's just shocking, like blank mind shocking. How did I get to this point? Then it's scary and surreal. And I had my kid with me, so I was busy keeping him safe and fed. Awful came about a month into it. And yes, we have an apartment now and all is well, thank you. I kept waking up in the middle of the night and I'd start walking home. I'd get a few steps and then stop and realize I had nowhere to go and turn back and walk over and lay on the ground. The ground is very cold and I felt a lot of shame. When I was a teenager, I had lots of problems with my mum. I pretty much chose to be homeless. I slept at a Catholic church across from my high school so I could still make it to school and graduate early. I remember really feeling sad because I slept where they put people's ashes, and I remember being so sad that those people could comfort me in death more than anybody alive. I used to talk to them. If there's camera footage, I think I'd look insane on it. I never realized how alone I was in the world until I was homeless. And I never realized how cold concrete can be. It chills you right to your bones and is painful. I started being homeless at 19. A previous foster parent put me out for coming home from college one night, and I'd called up a friend last minute. When I started to realize I wouldn't be able to crash or stay anywhere, I'm fairly certain I started to dread and spiral into a constant underlying depressive state. All I could think about was, am I going to die like this? Do I matter? Will no one help me? I'm sad. I'm scared. I don't want to feel like I have to beg. What if I'm stuck like this? Is this really my life right now? 19 through 26 was a very challenging time. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I didn't really realize what was going on. I was about 6 or 7 at the time. Dad said we were just going to go for a drive and to throw my backpack with all the clothes I could fit and one toy. Mum was just crying. Me and my brother sat in the back seat. He was a bit older and was holding our Sega Genesis and looking scared. We drove for a little while. It was already getting dark, and we parked in front of a Walmart, and Dad said he had to rest for a while. It was the first of many, many nights we slept in the car. I remember one of my parents was always awake, with their hands in their coat pocket. Looking back, it was obvious they had a weapon for protection and were sleeping in shifts. I was getting high, so it didn't really sink in until I was broke and dope sick. Then the desperation started, going to gas stations, jumping car to car, asking for money, stealing what I had to. It was a miserable existence. There are so many things you don't think about when you're not homeless. Taking a shower, washing your clothes, and the boredom, hours upon hours of nothing to do, and the constant noise. There was nowhere to go where it was truly quiet. Fortunately, I eventually got arrested for shoplifting and reached out to family who helped me get back on my feet. I was once fooled by an ex into moving back in with her after a breakup. After a couple of weeks, she decided to have a yard sale. This yard sale ended up featuring most of my stuff. Then with money in hand, she decided it was time I went back to my place. My place, which had nothing in it. My place which I'd given notice on. My place which was already awaiting a new renter. I spent my last 2 weeks sleeping on a hardwood floor using sweaters as blankets, and then when the day came to vacate, I threw all of my clothes in a plastic bag and just started walking. I was destitute. I had absolutely nothing and no idea where to start. It was right in the Canadian winter, so staying outside would be a death sentence in many cases. So I did the only thing I could think of. I sat in a 24-hour Tim Hortons. I used what little money I had to purchase small coffees once in a while, so I at least had an excuse to sit there. Eventually my cash ran out and I thought for sure I'd get the boot. Then one of the ladies working the counter came over and just handed me my usual order. I guess she probably figured out what was going on and felt bad. The second time she did it, I struggled not to cry. I'm pretty thankful because my next idea if I was asked to leave was to politely refuse and sit and wait for the cops. It would have been better than freezing to death. Morning came and I'd saved only enough to catch a single bus. I headed downtown to try and find some friends. I did, and I couch surfed between a lot of them. I never spent a night out in the cold, but I spent many in a coffee shop or bouncing between friends. It was the worst my depression ever got and the closest I ever came to just finishing things. My life is like a million times better now, but I'll never forget how worthless I felt. I'm just glad you made it through the other side. You really got the best and worst of people there. An ex who was either purposefully destroying your life or just making a ploy to get some cash, and then strangers and friends who extended you little kindnesses until you got back on your feet. Well done. My parents didn't tell us that they lost their house to the bank. One day we left everything but a few clothes and essentials. I remember sitting in the car, watching the world outside, and I felt extremely alone. The drive just went on endlessly unless we had to go to the bathroom. We ate some cracker things and had water at rest stops from bathrooms. Sleeping in a car seat that you couldn't lay back on was really hard to adapt to, so I didn't sleep for the first couple of nights. It really sucked, but as the days turned into weeks, things just kind of became the new normal. We'd drive around for hours and sometimes camp out at campgrounds or roadsides instead of sleeping in our woefully tiny car. This completely ruined our education because we couldn't stay at any school long. I loved school for the food, and I'd steal paper, pens, and books sometimes, so I had something to do. My mother eventually said she'd just homeschool us, but that was soon dropped for us kids to do for ourselves. I was able to almost get my GED before a sickness stopped me, but some of my younger siblings only have an education from 3rd or 4th grade. When it was winter, I remember having to take showers from those hand pumps at the camping ground. The water was so cold it would instantly burn and numb up from anything it touched. We also didn't have any winter clothes, so most of us would wrap up in our old blankets and layers of clothes. We rarely had any food, and I resorted to eating some of my clothes, paper, grass, or tiny pieces of my own skin to try to not feel hungry. Once we had pancakes as our main food for months. I cannot eat pancakes anymore because the very smell of them makes me sick now. Other food we got was ramen and rarely a hot dog. I'm not sure how my parents managed to get the food or even have money, even if it was very little. Maybe from a food pantry. Cooking food on the fire wasn't that hard to do, and I learned how to make a fire and gather what a fire needs. If we got sick, we never went to a doctor, just had to hope it got better. We were on and off homeless until I was in my late teens when my grandmother brought my parents a house for us all to live in. It feels so strange to actually have a home and even food. I still have a hard time knowing a lot of social norms because of the isolation from homelessness. You just do what you can to survive. I still resent my parents for avoiding any help from the government or going to any homeless shelters. They lost our house because of stupid spending and going into bankruptcy. Their habits never changed. We'd get a place to live for maybe a year or two, then lose it because my parents were terrible at managing money. I don't recall my very first time exactly. I do remember looking for a friend that was homeless, and his friends ended up watching over me. Everyone was drunk except me. I didn't sleep. More recently, less than a month ago, I lost my housing and everything I own. I'm alone this time. I sleep during the day and browse Reddit at night. I was homeless for 10 years the first time, and I am terrified now. I packed 3 bags, one with clothes, blankets, and a pillow, one with food and one with books. I couch surfed for a little bit, a week or 2 with each of my friends, slept in my car while I had it. I used other people's kitchens to cook stolen food and ate food that 7-Eleven threw away. Every morning at about 6 a.m, night shift would throw out all of the food that had sat too long. I'd wait for the clerk to go back inside and then fish the bag out of the dumpster. I slept outdoors in some parks after the car got towed, and I used my friend's goodwill. Got really good at 5 to 10 minute wash-ups in public bathrooms with hand soap. Teeth, armpits, under chest, and butt. Let me tell you how nasty hand soap tasted. I'd occasionally wash my underwear with hand soap real quick too, and dry it with the hand dryers. I'd generally use 2 24-hour McDonald's at about 4 a.m. so no one would walk in on me. What I'd do is panhandle outside a subway station for enough money for a smack rock, an egg of blow, a syringe, a sandwich, and tea. If you wear semi-professional clothes and say, "Oh my god, my purse got stolen, does anyone have any spare change?" you get more money than just asking and wearing, like, jeans. I'd then go to McDonald's, order the sandwich, and say I had to use the bathroom. Then I'd do a wash-up, grab the sandwich, and eat it on the way to the next McDonald's. At the second McDonald's, I'd order a tea and ask for lemon juice, pocket the juice, and ask to use the restroom. In the restroom, I'd use the juice to break down the smack, mix it with the blow, and shoot up. Then, sadly, I'd usually actually use the bathroom in a park or something. Did this for years until I accidentally got pregnant. I'd be gosh darned if I screwed up my kid by being a junkie, so I cold turkeyed everything. I own a house now, and I'll be 14 years clean on November 18th. My ex-wife made up a bunch of crap to get a restraining order. I got served at work while she simultaneously shut off my phone service and locked me out of our shared bank account. This was January 7th, 2016. I had a t-shirt and slacks to wear for clothes and nowhere to sleep. My car didn't have working heat. Thank God for my parents who got me a hotel, new phone, and some money for clothes. I ended up living in an extended stay hotel for 2 months while I looked for an apartment and got my affairs in order. The restraining order was dismissed, the divorce went to trial, and I got the house and the kids. Well, that must have sucked for your ex-wife, but yeah, when you lie to get your way and presumably end up in contempt of court, things don't tend to go your way when evidence starts going up. And then, how much mercy can you really expect from the man you've basically made homeless for a while? I lived at school until I dropped out due to a bunch of personal reasons piling up. My mum was mad that I dropped out and wouldn't even talk to me the first few days after, and my relationship with my father is complicated or non-existent. I took the train to my hometown, even though I didn't know what I'd do or where I'd go when I got there. I ended up staying the first night in my brother's room, not quite an apartment, just the one room with a kitchen and bathroom he shares with like 5 other people. After that, I posted to social media that I was in an unfortunate situation, and a friend I'd lost touch with, despite once being very close, offered that I could stay with him and his fiancée until I got a place of my own. I never actually had to sleep outside, and I found an apartment after about a month, so all in all, I was pretty lucky with how it turned out. Oh, and my mum and I are cool now, and my dad and I are also trying to rebuild our relationship after he finally divorced his no longer new wife. I've always referred to her as his new wife, even though it's been over a decade. I was homeless for a little while in the 80s. It's terrifying at first. You feel so unsafe. I was a teenager, and I wasn't willing to close my eyes and sleep on a park bench alone. So I went to a local shelter and lied about my age. They forced me to shower and do a pee test. It turns out the women in that shelter were scarier than the street, so the next night I didn't go back. I slept in a park, but ultimately made squatter friends and stayed with them. It was very much a community, and I felt safe and even loved there. The biggest problem with being homeless in the city is no one wants to let you use the bathroom. Even park bathrooms are locked. Squat peeing in between cars can be done quickly and undercover, but when you get your time of the month, it's a nightmare. These days I have stability, so I never pass a homeless person without buying them some food or giving them a bit of money. And if they use it for substances or booze, I honestly don't care. Living on the street is hard. Drink if you need to, my friend. What's a dark, secret practice in your profession? Have you ever started filling out a form for a quote on something, like an insurance website or literally anything online, and then changed your mind and said, "Nah, I don't want to give them my personal information," and then abandoned the form before pressing submit? If you think that stopped them from getting your personal info, it didn't. Most companies looking to capture leads will capture your info in real time as you enter it into a form. The submit button is just there to move you to the next step, not to actually send your information to the company. Pretty much all of the high-end, handmade in Australia jewelry in Australian stores is made at a secret factory in Bali. All the clients have to show an established business and sign confidentiality agreements. Customs broker here. Every day, hundreds of thousands of customers and air shipments arrive into United States territory. The value of customs entries entered every day is staggering. When we get licensed to be a customs broker, we're trained and tested not just on knowledge, but ethics. We even take a pledge to partner with CBP to uphold the law and cooperate with them should we come across anything suspicious. Why so much emphasis on this? Customs can't actually screen everything coming in. I'm oversimplifying here, but CBP basically works on the honor system. You file an entry saying what the shipment is, and they just take your word for it and release it. This happens hundreds of thousands of times a day. Maybe at best, customs could screen 3 to 7% of what's coming in. The rest of it's just waved through. I work at a county jail in the Midwest. The most disturbing thing about jail is the terrible loop some inmates get stuck in. Many inmates have mental issues and get caught in this loop where they can't have any clothes or items because they'll try to self-delete and they're locked in their cell for 23 hours a day. This makes them more angry, so when they're finally let out, they lash out at staff and they're locked down again. It's a vicious cycle for a whole lot of inmates, and it makes a lot of mental illnesses a whole lot worse. Staff can't do anything, though, because if they allow the inmate with mental illness to socialize, then they personally risk a lawsuit from those around them because of the individual's history of violent outbursts. Majority of hospitals won't take them because they won't risk their staff, so they're just stuck in a room and their only help is consistent medication stabilizing them. Not currently my profession, but ghostwriters in fiction. John Grisham, Danielle Steele, James Patterson, Jeanette Avanovich, ones like those. All of those big names with a New York Times bestseller every year use ghostwriters who are never credited or mentioned. It's barely even a secret. It's weird how being an author can go from something that you go from working super hard and passionately in for no money to getting to the point where you're just being paid to have other people write your books for you. Is it just something that can happen after your first bestseller? And when's George R. Martin finally going to throw in the towel and use one who can at the very least approximate an ending to A Song of Ice and Fire for us? There is a problem in substance addiction treatment in the United States called body brokering. Treatment can be very expensive, and insurance companies pay a lot of money for a patient to be there. Treatment centers will hire body brokers to find addicts with the best, highest-paying insurance and entice them to check in to the specific center. The treatment center then gives the broker a commission from the insurance money. This can go as far as body brokers literally putting more substances into the hands of some addicts before they come in, because the higher the levels in your system upon admittance, the more and longer the insurance company will pay to the treatment center. Brokers will also hire other addicts in a pyramid scheme kind of way to check into the treatment center, make friends with the other patients, and upon discharge encourage relapse so they come back to treatment. So you know the people who write instruction manuals or user guides and things you buy? Half the time they've never even seen or touched the product. Some dude just sends us pictures, a rough description of how it's supposed to work, and that's it. Sometimes we lick artifacts to quickly determine if they're bone or pottery. Bone sticks and pottery doesn't. Then we tap them on our teeth to determine if they're pottery or a rock. Rock will hurt and pottery won't. Archaeology. If it has to be accessed regularly in an IT setting, it's not secure. Not unless you're in an industry that actually polices it. Yes, people are dumb enough to pick up USB thumb drives they find on the ground. The nicer and newer it is, the more likely it'll get plugged in. Also, if you're looking to verify the security of your vendors, don't announce your visit. At a very large pizza chain restaurant that remains widely popular, we had these perforated pans for thin crusts and stuffed crust pizzas. They'd get washed in the dishwasher by the hundreds per day, and at least half would still have burnt cheese and stuff on them. Well, they were just stacked to dry. When making new pizzas in those pans, sometimes the pans that were left to dry overnight grew bits of mold around the burnt cheese. We were just told to put the dough on top, because otherwise we'd never keep up with the orders if we re-washed everything. The manager said, "Don't worry, it gets cooked." Oh god. I worked at a couple of pizza places, 2 big chain ones. At one of them, the grease was unreal. The dishwasher basically had to be scraped once a day to get the thick film off. They didn't have an actual dishwasher either, just made the drivers clean them, and the drivers didn't want to do the dishes, so they'd just toss them in there haphazardly. I can't tell you how many times I'd find pans with just a layer of oil in them still, and have to send a bunch of them back through. My husband worked for a short period long after I quit, and he said he caught one of the managers dipping plates in the sanitizing water and just sending them back out. Disgusting. The second big chain was all hand-washed and done properly, but I think that was specific to that particular store more than anything else. Sometimes librarians read the new books before registering them in the catalog for the public. Air traffic control. Cue the Breaking Bad jokes. A diagnosis of virtually any mental illness and a diagnosis of many physical conditions is disqualifying and will end your career. For that reason, people avoid doctors like the plague. It's like that in the reactor department in the US Navy as well. Undiagnosed and untreated mental illness? If it's not in your medical record, it doesn't officially exist, and therefore it's not a problem. Get treatment for your mental health problems? Now you're not allowed to do anything related to nuclear power anymore, and everyone hates you for not pulling your weight. And that's why I didn't re-enlist. Young kids talk to their teachers, coaches, counselors, and principals about their parents. Quite a lot. And kids pick up on all the dirty little secrets. Lots of performing musicians don't ever really get over stage fright. Many of them take beta blockers to help with nerves, although it's less about the mental side of it and more the fact that you physically can't perform if you get so nervous that your hands are shaking. That's what beta blockers help you with. You'll probably still feel anxious mentally, but any physical effects like shaking or sweating will be gone. It's not really a dark secret, as there's not usually bad side effects of beta blockers, but I guess some people might see that as cheating in their own way. Personally, I find it kind of inspiring knowing that lots of people struggle with the same thing as me, and there's a solution that isn't just suck it up and deal with it. I work in logistics, trucking, rail, ocean, and air freight. Everyone lies about everything all the time. Padding paperwork slows an auditor down. Every data point, all the minutiae of the calculations, unnecessarily dense explanations of statistical methods that go on at length with notes about distribution fitting. The auditors aren't usually very technical, so they stop at each spot along the way without realizing they can throw half the document out. If you're good, you can balloon a 30-page document into 100 in a matter of minutes. IT. Outages occur, sure. Bugs happen too. Most of the time, though, these things are known and put off until they happen and are complained about. Good to know that the people running the world are basically just the same as the rest of us, to be honest, putting aside all the crap we should be doing until it's too big of a problem to ignore. Many hotels often sell rooms multiple times. I used to work in an airport hotel, knowing that chances are some guests won't arrive due to missed or delayed flights, so we sell even more rooms than we have. You have guests checking out from 2 or 3 a.m. due to early flights. Even though the room is technically still theirs, you quickly and sometimes poorly clean the room and tell the arriving unexpected guest or new booking that there's a random computer issue and to wait 20 minutes and then check them into the departed guest's room, praying. Multiple times I've had to run a kettle under a cold tap to hide the fact that the previous guest used it 15 minutes before the new guest arrives. Airlines do this crap with airplanes too. Once I had a connecting flight while heading back to college, which was, luckily, not a long flight and I had plenty of time. They pulled this crap and initially wanted someone to forgo their seats for a $50 coupon. I let it go up to a $250 direct check and then volunteered, and they still tried to go with credit towards a ticket. I only accepted the check and then got paid that amount for a couple of hours watching Netflix in the airport. Many bills are literally written by lobbyists or special interest organizations. I've seen my boss give bill languages to a state legislator and then found the same language in print a few days later several times. The bill may change in committee, but usually not drastically against the original intent. How many people work with children, like teachers or childcare workers, who don't follow confidentiality guidelines, gossiping about families with co-workers, talking about children's home situations, creeping families' social media, stuff like that? Eesh. You do not want to know how long food sits on the loading dock before it gets into a cooler. I work at a theme park and we use codes with a number for a situation that could happen in the park to not create panic. We also use codes for some category of people, like code 25 means there's a fire, code 20 is for mentally disabled people. We also use hand signals sometimes for some situations. When we take x-rays of your pelvis, we can see your member, and we can see your hoo-ha. I was just more embarrassed seeing the massive turd I was storing on the x-ray when the cute tech handed over my charts. I've worked in fast food, and it's a sad reality that many workers will come to work sick because they can't afford to lose wages. One year, the flu was going around town, and I think our restaurant was ground zero. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Teachers talk crap about students as much as students do about teachers. Don't get me wrong, we love you and we want to see you succeed. But some of you are buttholes. I'm sure most of you know this, but 99.9% of advertisements involving real people is acted and scripted. Even when the people being interviewed are indeed non-actors, they're prompted on what to say. For example, we recently interviewed a guy who won a car from one of our brands. The first round, the interviewer said, "Congrats on your win. How do you feel?" Really great. It's a real surprise, to be honest. Thank you." And then after several rounds and coaching, it went something like this. "Congrats on your win. How do you feel?" "I feel so lucky to have won a insert car brand here. The design and handling is first rate, and I'm most impressed by the fuel consumption. I will definitely keep on holding insert car brand here as my top car of choice." Smile for the camera. As a copywriter, most of the articles you read on the internet are written by us. We have no idea what we're talking about. We get the topic, Google it, and reword other articles into a new one. All we have to do is make sure we include a few SEO words. I've written articles for HVAC companies, movie and TV reviews, tons of different merchandise, sales, and so much other stuff I've forgotten. If it's a blog post online, it's likely fake. There is at least one water bottle or soda can or spray paint can sitting on a piece of blocking behind your drywall somewhere in your house. Some stores that sell used merchandise like video games and movies will pay you money for stolen stuff even when they know it's stolen. It doesn't hurt them to get brand new games that were only released hours ago for a fraction of the cost. Then they turn around and sell them for $5 cheaper than a new copy. They're getting brand new, never opened $60 games for a few bucks and making a huge profit. Scuba instructor. We preach about how important safety is to our students. When we dive for fun and without paying customers in tow, we get up to some very questionable stuff. This is essentially the way almost every dangerous field is, I feel like. I'm the professional. I've been doing this for years. I've accepted all the risks and know exactly how and why this stupid thing I'm doing could kill me. Do not be like me. As a teacher, I can tell you that sometimes we learn something the day before we teach it to you. Biotech produces a lot of waste. The overwhelming majority of international trade is done by incompetent, poorly trained, and uneducated staff from poor countries that are also exploited. Government checks are all corrupt, even from Western countries with generally low corruption. This is by design. It's a miracle that ships don't collide and sink constantly. Again, this is one of those things that should be surprising but isn't. The fact that there are people piloting and guiding vessels with hundreds or thousands of tons of cargo who don't know what the heck they're doing is just yet another of life's ongoing absurdities. Documentary editor here. This varies depending on the content or genre, but documentaries can never be completely true. The ethics of filmmaking is disputed among many theorists. Those who work on documentaries understand that they're almost as fictional as completely made-up stories. Again, this depends on the project, but some common practices like frankenbiting, which means splicing sentences and words to create a different message, used especially in reality TV and really dramatic documentaries, are necessary to make a documentary watchable. There are hundreds of hours of footage, and if you see or hear something in the documentary, the creators wanted you to be exposed to that over a different piece of footage. This can lead to lives being destroyed, whether a person is posed as the enemy or antagonist, or they're displayed in a way that doesn't represent them accurately, which is most, if not all the time. I've had to take mental health days off from working because I became so worried about how these people's lives will be affected by my decisions. Nature documentaries can be harmful as well. You know how lemmings follow each other off cliffs and die? That was all faked in a documentary called White Wilderness by Disney. Lemmings aren't stupid. But this one documentary has made this a commonplace, quote, fact. As far as suggestions for more factual documentaries, I honestly can't say unless I worked on them personally. As an editor, I know things that will never see the light of day, so it would be idiotic of me to say I can tell when something's left out or misconstrued. Suffice to say that you'll never know as much as the editor did, and the editor and directors will never know as much as the actual people involved. One documentary that comes to mind is the documentary Blind Spot, because it's very sparse editing-wise, so it looks like raw footage that an editor would work with to edit into a more sensational film. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I think there's a part where the doc's crew lets her watch the interview and make corrections to what she says. That might be wrong though, it's been a few years. Also, I acknowledge that ums and ahs are edited out, but isn't that still a form of manipulation? I worked on a small doc that was literally just noting inventions in the state, and the amount of editing we had to do just to make the old people watchable was significant, so that they sound completely different on film than they do in real life. I ended up quitting a career because people of all genders and ages kept trying to solicit me for bedroom favors. I'm a young male massage therapist. You can buy stamps from your mailbox. Just leave a note and money and stamps will be there the next day. I don't know if this is a total secret, but a lot of the talking points about how expensive lawyers are or how plaintiffs' lawyers get unreasonably high payouts for doing little work is driven by corporations trying to discourage people from suing them. For example, most plaintiffs' lawyers are working entirely on a contingency basis, meaning that they advance all costs with the risk of no reimbursement and don't see a dime unless they win. And almost all of them will give you a free consultation. But by spreading the false narrative of, it's going to cost you to even talk to a lawyer about that, big companies discourage you from even consulting one and finding out the truth. Similarly, the narrative of plaintiffs' lawyers getting unreasonably high fees for cases is also designed to misrepresent the truth. For example, you hear a big company say, this class action got $2.50 for each person, but the attorneys got $250,000, or something like that. But the only reason the attorneys got all that money is because the company went all in litigating over $2.50, racking up attorneys' fees on both sides, when they could have short-circuited the whole thing from the outset by saying, you got us, here's your money, and paid next to nothing in attorneys' fees. Plus, $2.50 times 1 million people is a lot of money, meaning that the fees were justified by the total amount recovered, and that the case wasn't so insignificant to begin with. But by controlling the narrative, companies make it seem like it's unreasonable to be mad that they stole millions from consumers, and that it's even more unreasonable for someone whose job it is to take on all the risk and then get paid based on a percentage of what their results are. Sure, there are windfall cases, but usually those cases are needed just to offset the 10 other cases where you took a haircut on fees. It's like putting $100 in a slot machine, losing 10 times, and then hitting one jackpot on your last turn to make back $100, and then having the casino say, he got $100 for a single game of slots? This is ridiculous. Until you're forced to give back $90 of what you won. How likely are you going to be to play again? There's a lot more to this, but the long and short of it is that the companies are projecting when they paint lawyers as greedy, and they do so to minimize the chance that they get called on their bullcrap. This is actually an element of truth that I've heard bits and bobs of, but had never really gone all in on looking at the facts. And yes, lawyers, especially up-and-coming ones, take pro bono and contingency cases all the time. It's worth exploring your options. University professor here, we don't actually read your entire answer. Most of us don't. It depends on a lot of factors, and not everyone does it. Service costs are based on how much money you look like you have. I'm a woodworker and contractor for a few other things. I come to your house, you tell me what you want done. My jumping off point is how much the market will bear. If I think you can afford a $4,000 solid oak bookcase, then that's what I'll quote you. I can just make a cheaper version that I make less money on, but why would I do that? It's not that I'm just ripping you off, I'm selling you a better product, but in doing so I make more money. So, when getting a quote, it can pay to be very direct about what you want to spend, or you're going to be sold the most expensive version they think you can afford. The real reason programmers have so many screens on is because one of them always has Google pulled up on it. Nobody knows what they're doing 100% of the time, it's typically always, this should work, or, well, I hope this works. Lots of unethical shipping companies even today dump a lot of garbage, oily sludge, waste-contaminated water, and oil out when sailing in international waters far away from the shore. There are only a few hundred players today who are actually executing business trades while still keeping the carbon footprint and environment as one of their core policies. I'm glad to be working with one of them. When I worked for fast food, everyone else there was a ghost hunter. They'd put together special weekends to go to haunted places around the city. Church worker here. This may be specific to the church I work for, but I think what I'm about to say is pretty common for bigger churches. You know, those with like 1,000 or more members. They are two-faced. They'll tell the janitorial crew that janitorial service is truly a ministry and it's so good and so important, but guess what? When the church needs to make a cutback, we're some of the first ones screwed over. We're the ones expected to clean until 2 or 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning after people have used the building until midnight. As a woman, I've had to walk away from some pretty filthy behavior from the guy pretty high up in the church's hierarchy, and no one really has my back about it. There are so many fake, judgmental, hateful people who hide behind the guise of Christianity. People will lock others out of the building and laugh at them. They tell people who aren't dressed presentable enough to sit in the back if that person isn't run off by their frozen, hateful stares. This is so anti what a church and Christianity should be. Those who've adopted older children, what was your experience like? My best friend's family adopted a kid our age when we were in high school. I think he moved in with them around 14 or 15 years of age. He still has a relationship with his biological family, and he doesn't usually refer to his adopted parents as mum and dad. He'll say second mum and second dad, or just use their names. But he does refer to my friend and her brother as siblings. We're all mid to late 20s now, and according to her, it's been really great. My friend and her family are small white people, and he's a really big black guy, so he'll sometimes show pictures of his adoptive parents to people and be like, "This is my mom and dad." And when others comment about him being adopted, he'll pretend he had no idea he was adopted. All in all, it was a great move. He's been able to attend the college of his choice and go into a field of study he wouldn't have otherwise been able to. My parents never adopted him, but when I was 14, we had a 15-year-old boy move in with us who stayed until he was 21. It was very strange for me as a teenage girl to have an older boy who I'd never met move into my house, and to see my parents take him in as one of their own. There were suddenly all these rules for me, like I wasn't allowed to wear pajamas around the house or be home alone with him for the first year or so. However, he turned out to be the loveliest kid. While we never really got over the awkwardness and never really bonded, the whole experience was overwhelmingly positive. In particular, my mum became much happier with the fulfillment that she got from the experience, as she'd been struggling to find purpose in her life. He'll never know how much our family improved from having him, and I hope that one day I'll have the chance to tell him. I've 4 adopted siblings, 3 of which were adopted as teens. The first few days were always rough. My brother Chuck got into a fight with my mum and left. He went to a friend's who'd also been putting him up for a bit, but couldn't stay longer than one night. When he got to school, he broke down in the principal's office and they called my mum. She left work and he apologized for the fight and absolutely begged to still be able to live with us. She told him, "Just because you screw up one time, it doesn't mean we're going to give up on you." He moved back in and immediately made my brother and I look bad. He was so grateful just to have a place to stay, food every night, and to feel loved that any chores were the least he could do. My sisters were very similar situations. When my sister Liz crashed my mum's car, she hid at a friend's for like 3 days until my mum convinced her she was allowed to come home. Or when she got pregnant at 16, she couldn't even tell my mum. She just had to nod yes or no while my mum basically played 20 questions. As the years have gone on, all of them have grown into pretty well-rounded people. They've managed to make something of themselves. They definitely have noticeable emotional scars, but they cope as well as anyone. I'm sure that there are some heartbreakers to come in our long line of stories tonight, but it's great to hear that when given an environment of tolerance and forgiveness, people can really shine and grow into well-adjusted adults. Kindness is key, as always. I was adopted. Taken in at 16 and formally adopted at 18. The first couple of days were a little awkward, but it's been an absolute joy. I still have some trouble feeling like a legitimate piece of the family, perhaps because I wasn't adopted when I was really young, but I've been trying to fight that feeling. Family isn't bound by blood, which is why people can get married or find family when theirs has been cut loose or deceased. Nobody should have to be alone in this world. My brother is adopted. He's 11 and turning 12 next week. My dad adopted him after a year of fostering. He's called me his sister since the fostering began. He's the sweetest kid in the world. He never fights, never complains, and never talks back. Gets perfect grades. The situation in which my dad comes to adopt him is a strange one, and I think it has a lot to do with how grateful he is to be a part of our family. I was an only child for 23 years, and I married and moved out of my parents' house years ago. I still love my brother, and I don't think of him any differently than I would any other sibling. We haven't adopted, but we've had foster kids through the years. Uniformly, the older kids walk into the house, find the dogs, and interact with them first. Then they'll ask where the TV is, we don't have one, and they'll express disbelief and disgust that we don't. Then they resume playing with the dogs. The first few days are always really weird because you've invited someone else with an entirely different culture or lifestyle into your home and you raise them. We find stuff they do a little weird and they find stuff we do a little weird. 2 brothers we had, 6 and 12, didn't know the names of meals, for example. They called them all lunch. They'd never had meals, they just snacked on whatever they could find through the day. So they called it the lunch that we eat in the morning and the lunch at night. The same brothers also steadfastly refused to wear shirts in the house because, well, they'd never done so. We recently had a chance to talk to the younger one, who's back in care in another part of the state, and we asked him what those first days were like. He told us he was so little and so scared that we'd be mean to him. He was afraid that we'd bully him. He said he was less scared when we had dogs and that he was really glad when we became the parents God gave him. Words from his current foster mum, I think. Then he said he wanted to be a foster parent when he grew up so he could show kids that it's not that bad, and my heart ate my throat, and now we can never stop fostering. When I was 14, a family at our church that was unable to have children of their own decided to adopt a child from Russia. After a long process of paperwork and a ton of fees, they went over to go meet her and bring her home. When they got there, they found out that she had 4 older brothers and sisters living with her in the orphanage. Evidently, the orphanage had no issue splitting them up, but the family friends weren't willing to do that. They did bring her home, but immediately started campaigning at church to get the other 4 children adopted. 3 of the 4 remaining children were adopted within a week or 2, but the oldest child was 16 years old, and nobody wanted to adopt someone that old. At the time, I was 14 years old, and my older blood brother was 18. My parents were convinced that he fit too perfectly within our ages to be able to let him split up from his other brothers and sisters. So, we adopted him. After the same ridiculous amount of paperwork and fees that the first family had had to go through, we were able to get him over to the US. When my parents brought him back, he didn't speak any English and had been smoking cigarettes and working a construction job since he was 12. It definitely took a bit of work to get him to quit smoking and tell him that he had to start high school. The first year was a bit weird. We kept an English to Russian dictionary handy at all times to communicate, and we made a lot of borscht to help him feel at home, which we found out later he hated. He loved computers and playing games and was able to find friends at school very quickly with the same interests, which was great because people who play WoW all the time tend to stay out of trouble. He was actually very smart and able to catch up very quickly in school, but constantly used misunderstanding the language to get away with things. My parents didn't let it slide though. They'd pull out the English to Russian dictionary and lay out how he'd done messed up. They were always sure to not single him out though. When I messed up, they punished me exactly like they punished him, so that he could see it was no different for anyone. Early on, he definitely tried to bully me a bit, but he capped out at 5'5" and I grew to 6'2". So that didn't last long. I always enjoyed video games too, and we were able to start bonding over that as my older blood brother went off to college. Me and him never had a lot to talk about, but would sit quietly and play games. I always kind of thought that we weren't very close, but as time went on, I realized it was just an understanding that we were very different people, but we were there for each other. After a year or so, it was very normal. He was just part of the family. The biggest thing my parents did to make sure it was clear he was part of the family was to make sure that they went to every single activity he was part of. Every track meet, every school function, every church event, they were there and they always dragged me along too. At the time, I hated it, but I realize now that they just wanted to make sure he never questioned whether or not he was part of the family. After high school, he went off to college and graduated, and he's now a successful construction manager who makes way more money than me and isn't afraid to give me crap about it. I mostly see him at family gatherings, which he comes to every single one of by choice. But when we see each other, we immediately pick back up where we left off and try to hit each other in the groin, because he's my brother. Adopted my daughter when she was 14. Every kid is different and comes with their own set of problems. However, all adopted children have attachment and abandonment issues. It was very difficult, but we pulled through, and now she's 20 and doing great. It's very hard, but you gain courage and happiness from the knowledge that you saved a person's life. You can pull them out of loneliness, unhappiness, and living in fear, and give them love and happiness. Nothing else I ever do in my life is going to come close to how good I feel about my wife and I deciding to adopt. If you go for it, look for support. Get the government to help provide you with therapy for the child and yourselves. Learn about attachment and abandonment issues, and the therapies that deal with them. Yeah, I can imagine that the later you get a kid, they've probably been in the foster system for a while, or they've been recently taken away from a less than ideal home situation for a bit. It must be so hard to strike the right balance between loving support and not overwhelming them. Lots of heartwarming stories today. I'm a sibling. My parents adopted twice, one at 7, the other at 12, several years later. We're all over 21 now. I think our family has experienced both ends of the spectrum. Couldn't have been more different experiences. For the 7-year-old, it felt like they'd been with our family all along in a very short time, a matter of months. It was so much fun watching them learn everything you take for granted a little bit, like trips to the swimming hole, seeing a dog, stuff like that. Pretty much a Hallmark movie. The 12-year-old was a much more difficult adjustment. Still had great fun welcoming and getting to know them, but there was a totally reasonable lack of trust that made getting started slower. Obviously, loved them to pieces, but it often felt much more like a Mexican standoff than a honeymoon. There was some major detachment disorder. They never really let one parent in and probably never will. There was lots of lying and manipulation, triangulating family members, just all around very tricky. This is expected. You have to understand that every adult in this person's life has abandoned them. They learned to survive under harsh circumstances. It was very heartbreaking for me to see and understand both sides of a broken relationship. For many years, one parent desperately desiring a healthy relationship with their child, who they love, but also understanding it probably can't happen. There's definitely a chip missing regarding empathy, but you roll with it and love them anyway. I know it was incredibly taxing on both parents and the child, but ultimately they had a safe place to grow and learn, and that's the job. Good vibes are a secondary luxury. Adoption is very beautiful, but it can also be earth-shatteringly difficult. I have a lot of respect for adoptive parents. Parenting is already difficult without modifiers. It's been beautiful for our family, and also very difficult sometimes. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. We adopted an almost 15-year-old through international adoption. Without going into too much detail, there was some pretty extreme neglect, trauma, and a hostile situation growing up. We were his first actual family setting. The first year and a half was, to put it mildly, hell. We were the worst-case scenario story they warn you could happen during your adoption classes. Violent outbursts several times a week, thankfully directed only at me. If they'd been towards our other kiddo, this would have been a different story. Multiple screaming, throw-down tantrums daily, several personal hygiene issues, food hoarding, extreme anxiety and hyper-awareness, horrendous trauma-based phobias of the dark, loud noises, small spaces, dogs, certain foods, rope and fire, stuff like that. The only places he felt safe enough to relax were public areas with a lot of people around. Anytime you were one-on-one with him, he was on alert. We took him to therapy, all the therapy, sometimes 2 or 3 times per week. We took our other kid to therapy to make sure he was doing okay during all of this and put measures in place to keep him safe. We went to our own therapy and education sessions to make sure we were being as effective on the parenting front as possible and to deal with the second-hand trauma from the stories our son began sharing with us as he started to trust us more. We converted our bedroom into a safe room and packed up any household item that had personal significance and put it in storage. We set up an emergency call system so that we could have someone else over anytime he had a violent episode, as he would immediately calm down if there was a witness. We enrolled him in a class to help him learn social and life skills, and we took him to karate class, which given the violence seemed like a terrible idea to a lot of people, to help him learn to feel more safe and in control of himself. We got him onto medication for his anxiety, which helped tremendously. About a year in, something clicked for him. I think maybe he realized that we weren't going to bully or reject him and that it was okay to let us in. He'd spent a lot of time trying to drive us away to protect himself. If he didn't care about our family, he wouldn't hurt us as badly if we, in his words, threw him away. Spaces between outbursts started getting longer. The food hoarding, stealing, and personal hygiene issues disappeared. He started to take on more personal responsibility. He began participating in family activities and wanted to spend time with us. It's been nothing short of breathtaking watching him change and grow. We're nearly 6 years in now. Our son no longer has violent outbursts or tantrums. All grandma's antiques are back on the mantel. His phobias, while not completely gone, are far more manageable. Our goals for him have gone from keep him away from crime and out of jail to help him live independently and pursue his personal goals. He asked to change his name so he could be named after his adoptive dad, and he changed his last name to ours. I get handmade cards for my birthday, and sometimes he gives me hugs, just because. Parenting isn't supposed to come with prizes, but that first, "I love you, Mum," was perhaps the greatest gift I've ever been given. Sometimes he tells me, "I had bad things happen to me in the past and I can't change that, but they can't make me do things. I get to choose my future." He's a pretty incredible person, and we're so proud of the young man he's become. I adopted 2 daughters when they were 7 and 10 from foster care. They came from a horrific home. They were both severely traumatized. First, going from no kids to a single, in my case, mom of 2 very broken children is not for the faint of heart. You need a very good, understanding support system. Second, you need to have your own therapy sessions. It's incredibly helpful to vent to a professional who deals with the emotionally damaged children as a profession. And third, they'll have issues for a long time. And there's no quick fix. Even if their birth homes weren't super traumatic, you have to remember they lost everything. Their parents, grandparents, friends, teachers, classmates, neighbors, pets, toys, home, and clothes. Just imagine everyone and everything you've ever cared about and have ever known being loaded onto an airplane and crashed into the ocean, gone forever. That's what they have to deal with. The scars last a lifetime. Fourth, make sure their teachers, daycare providers, new family members, and parents of their friends know what they're going through. The way emotionally damaged children act out can really catch people off guard if they're not expecting it. Give them tips on how to handle it if possible. Fifth, remind them over and over it's okay to be sad, angry, scared, and hurt, and whatever else they need. It's important for them to feel it's okay to feel this way. Sixth, many times the child keeps their emotions bottled up so they can feel certain they're safe. A lot of the time they don't feel safe until the adoption is done, and they're sure that they're not going back. This is when the years of pent-up anger, fear, anxiety, and stuff comes out. It can be really rough, so be ready. Remember they're doing this because they feel safe with you. They formed a bond with you. Seventh, give them as much choice as possible. Victims of a problematic upbringing suffer greatly from having their sense of control taken away. Do you want your glass filled with milk this high or this high? Do you want to go to bed at 8:20 or 8:30? Do you want bubbles in your bath or not? They sound small, but every time they get to make a choice, they gain a little bit of control back. It adds up over time. And 8th through a million, tell them you love them and nothing they can do will ever make you stop. They will test this a lot. Mine are 15 and 18 now. It's been a rough road, but I couldn't imagine my life without them. We adopted our 2 boys out of foster care when they were 4 and 5. Not necessarily older, but it's older than's typical, I can tell you. They were in a bad place in their foster home, emotionally and physically, but that separation still took its toll. First, understanding it's a bit jarring to have no kids one day, and the next you have 2 who are fully dependent on you. It's obvious, but still nothing you can be prepared for. Next, know that if they come from a bad place, they're going to be sure you're bad as well. They'll be convinced no matter how nice you are, you'll do something awful as well. They'll test you. They'll misbehave to test you. They'll conspire to test you. But persistence will make a difference. You'll get frustrated, but the rewards of giving these kids a stable, loving home will never ever be replaced. It's been 10 years since we adopted them, and they're my best friends. We've seen them through so much, and while I certainly haven't been a perfect parent, I'm proud I've provided them a path and future they likely wouldn't have had otherwise, due to no fault of their own. Yep, and all I've been able to think about this entire time is how hard it would be to consistently be a good role model, whilst also being put through a very trying situation yourself, and I'm not sure I could. But I suppose no parent is perfect, and as long as you're doing your best and providing love and effort, then it counts for something. Wow. I adopted my daughter when she was 8. She's 13 now. She's a pretty easy person to get along with, so we didn't have any of the horror stories you read about. However, certain challenges were inevitable. She and I are very different people, and her temperament, and maybe her personality, were already pretty fully formed when she moved in. So while my son, adopted at age 3, and I can talk about things like politics, my daughter is just not interested in conversations that may lead to disagreements. This is just one example of a challenge where we recognize the difference in one another, and it took a while to figure out how to be a close mother or daughter in spite of these differences. Probably the biggest thing, though, is if you adopt an older child, you've got to recognize and respect that their loyalty will always be divided, and that's okay. I know she loves her bio mum, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I know that she feels divided between her old life and her new one, and my goal is to make that division as easy as possible for her. So, what's it like? Challenging. Less so for me than many other people because my daughter was fairly easy and I'm pretty flexible. And is it worth it? Hell yes. Little things that seem routine for you might not be routine for them. Kids just don't know because of a different way of doing things that was the way of life for them for 8 years. An example is teeth brushing. My kid's birth parents just didn't teach her how to properly brush her teeth. She just kind of chewed on the brush and didn't rinse her mouth out when she was done. I can speak from the other side of being the adoptee. I was adopted along with my biological little sister from Korea to the same parents in the States. I've always lived with the idea that one can choose their own family. It wasn't something merely given to you. Our parents were amazing, loving, dedicated people, and it only took a few days for our relationship to be the same as if I were their biological son for the last 6 years. Off the bat, I was calling my new parents Mom and Dad, while they called me son. My sister, on the other hand, took a long time to come around. She really struggled with her identity, being Korean, and having to adjust to an American home. She was really caught up with wondering if life could have been better if she was back in Korea, and if there was a more special bond between blood-related parents. That, along with the fact that we grew up in a fairly conservative, almost completely Caucasian area, we'd receive insensitive comments regularly. I think she felt very out of place. She'd often lash out at our parents and would claim if they were her real parents, they would have never done this or that. To this day, she calls our parents by their first names as a remnant of her rebellion. I think our parents have handled it well. They always supported her and realized that even with all the love they gave her, she'd need to figure it out on her own. It took her about 11 years until she turned 16 to figure things out and finally accept who she was. We'd always get odd stares as a family, since we look extremely different from our Jewish parents, but our parents cared for us, obviously much more than our biological parents did, and we should appreciate the opportunity of having a loving family that we've been given. I adopted a 16-year-old and have fostered 8 other children over the years. She's 23 now and thankfully still very much a part of our family. First, every child is different. There's no one way that it will go, and they all react in different ways. Second, plan on the first weeks, months, and even year to be relationship building, and it will take time. Invest in building the relationship and laying a loving and trusting foundation. There'll be friction, especially with older children, as they're used to doing things differently, and likely have a more fully developed worldview that may be significantly different than yours. Overall, my approach is, leaving out a ton of details, first identifying things they like about themselves and show appreciation for those traits. Then demonstrate that you care and will take the time to listen to them and really understand their thoughts and perspectives. And finally, do research to set up appropriate boundaries and evolve them as the relationship deepens. This is especially important if they've had trauma in the past. Old school gamers, what will the new gamers of today never experience? Having to decide what saves to delete because you can't afford a new memory card. Oh lord, I still remember when memory cards first became a thing and I had no idea about them. I'd rented a PlayStation 1, Final Fantasy VII, and Resident Evil 2. Cut to me realizing my predicament and playing Resident Evil 2 all the way through to the alligator before dying. My god, that was awful. Remember in fighting games how unlocking characters was usually fun and unorthodox with different tasks you had to do to unlock them? You don't see that as much today. Having no idea what you're supposed to do next in a game. There were moments in old games where you just ran around for ages trying to figure out if you had missed something or if it was a bug. Now you just Google or YouTube it. Not to mention there are many in-game guides to doing things such as quest markers. Going back to every town and talking to every NPC hoping to jumpstart the story again was real back in the day. Putting the goddamn disc in and playing the game immediately after. Even better, plugging the cartridge in and playing even more immediately after. Actually, one company never left this system. Nintendo's always had at least one cartridge system active on the market since the NES. The awe and astonishment of the huge leaps in graphics. I still remember talking with my friends at school about how Final Fantasy X was basically indistinguishable from real life. I remember watching the first Halo trailer on the GameStar CD and I was just blown away. Could graphics ever get better than that? Going to the Scholastic Book Fair and buying a cheat code book or a strategy guide. Networking with my friends on how to get through challenging areas instead of looking it up on YouTube. 100% of my childhood friendships were forged around trading video game tips and sharing Nintendo Power Maps. I remember a kid in elementary school wanted me to pay him for directions on how to get some item in Super Mario RPG. I wouldn't pay him, but his little brother told me for free later that day, so all was well. LAN parties, man. I'm not going too far back, but LAN parties were a huge part of the scene back in the early noughties. In my city, they're basically dead now. Sitting in the back seat, poring over the game manual for the game you just bought as your parents drive you home from the store. You only did that in the back seat? The narrator basically just read all of his game manuals whenever his parents booted him off the computer. Those thick Blizzard ones with all the lore and unit descriptions honestly got some reading time even when the PC was fully available. Old school manuals really effed, man. I miss being that excited about a game book. A crowd of people standing around a new fighting game at the arcade with a line of quarters on the screen serving as the cue for challenges. Winner stays. Honestly, arcade games in general. I remember playing the old Gauntlet Dark Legacy game, a game which certainly devoured quarters, but at a mostly fair rate. My brother actually went to the local arcade and played so frequently that he eventually beat the game, which gave you a code to send in for the chance to win a t-shirt that said, "I crushed Garm," the game's final boss. I don't think I've ever really seen anything like that in the modern era of video games. Arcade gaming was great, like that desperation of being down to your last couple of quarters and patrolling the arcade to get the best gaming experience, to round out your day before you ran out of cash. Blowing on the cartridge to fix it. Yeah, and blowing on it wasn't even what fixed it. Taking the game out and putting it back in was. In-person multiplayer. No need to buy 4 copies of a system and a game in order to play with friends. I thought it was going to make a comeback with 3D TVs. MotorStorm on PlayStation 3 allowed 2 players to play together, but each got the entire screen. Instead of having 3D glasses with left eye and right eye lens, you'd get 2 sets of glasses. One would have 2 left eye lenses and the other would have 2 right eye lenses. It allowed 2 images to display on screen at once, but the pair of glasses you were wearing would dictate who saw what. Mapping out dungeons by hand on graph paper and using a spiral notebook as a do-it-yourself quest journal. Dialing into a BBS to play BRE and ISA versus people that live in another state. Lugging your PC to your friend's house and gaming via a null modem cable. Copy protection code wheels. Switching to channel 2, I believe it was, in order to play games. Screwing the adapter onto the back of the TV to be able to screw in the coax cable from the NES. Saving your game at the worst time and having to start the whole frickin' thing over. When you put quick save and quick load next to each other on the keyboard and press the wrong one as you're falling into a pit of radioactive goo in Half-Life. Genuine surprises and mysteries. Obviously, there's occasionally one that comes through like GTA or weird unfound Dark Souls stuff, but most everything has its code decompiled and secret assets located eventually. I'm thinking particularly of the hunt for the Triforce in Ocarina of Time. There was some Brazilian girl who was sending what turned out to be fake screenshots of supposedly finding the Triforce. Big long hullabaloo turned out to be fake, but it sucked up so many hours of my young life trying to replicate. The golden age of MMOs, especially Mamorpagas. Back in the noughties, they felt like role-playing games in a world full of other players. Take World of Warcraft as an example. No microtransactions, no easy ways to success, everything had to be worked for in that game, and the satisfaction you got from achieving something was insane. You actively reached out to other players in the community because playing alone in World of Warcraft up until Cataclysm was absolutely impossible. You had your go-to people you'd hit up for dungeons or group quests. Yes, those once existed. Elite mobs, anyone? Or even raids. Nowadays, you just queue up for everything with a single click, which isn't necessarily bad. It's a great quality of life thing, but it effectively killed the world in World of Warcraft. You can sit in a town and just do most stuff from there without stepping outside of it. A lot of Mamorpagas sacrificed the community feel and world for quality of life and accessibility, but that's the case for most games nowadays. Quick rewards everywhere to satisfy the player base and keep them playing. Well, data mining and immediate access to information also contributed heavily to the decline. So much in EverQuest and early World of Warcraft was unknown that made the experience genuinely thrilling. Nowadays, everything's out there already, and people in the beta branch just post sims of the new top-performing specs. That's one thing I do miss. You'd be geared up as humanely possible before a raid dungeon, and it would be months before anyone managed to figure out how to kill that boss. Even with a non-MMO such as Diablo 3, I remember it taking a few months of nerfs before most people completed Inferno difficulty. Big box PC games. They were a little bit larger than a ream of printer paper, but there was so much room for artwork showcasing the game outside and inside the box, not to mention a thick manual or two and extra artwork that came inside. I think it was a holdover from when software shipped on floppy disks. Over time, more games came out on optical disks, which meant that there was more than enough space to store a digital online manual. As a consequence, boxes shrank, and those full physical manuals became booklets, which later became instruction cards. Now, even those are being phased out in favor of digital downloads. Oh man, the narrator misses those big chunky box boys so much. These days, every now and again you see collector's editions, but not really so much for PC games. I miss having big books and prima strategy guides included in some of those. It was truly the most exciting thing a teen could waste their awful service job money on. We are losing local couch co-op more and more with new games. Oddly enough, there are lots of small-budget local co-op games on PC these days. I don't know anyone to play them with, though. Everyone's too busy with stupid stuff like raising their kids or working overtime. Playground rumors. I barely experienced this since I was born in '96, so Google was around and popular for most of my gaming childhood. But there was a time where a friend would tell you something like, "I heard that if you use strength on the truck you can catch a Mew," or "I heard there's a way to get a glitch Pokemon that lets you get infinite Master Balls," and you had no easy way to verify that except to try it yourself. Now, if someone says, "I heard that there's actually a 4th Pikachu evolution after Raichu," you can just Google it and data miners have already conclusively proven if it's true or false. Having to write down the code to skip to that level because I couldn't save the game. Changing the channel to channel 3, or video. I still love the Hideo joke during the Psycho Mantis fight. You losing your game because someone answered the house phone. PvP games are just meant to be fun. Everything has to be an esport these days, and that attracts the super toxic crowd of hardcore gamers or whatever. Not sure if this is true, but as someone who mostly plays competitive online games, overcoming imbalances. I used to play Star Wars Brood War a bunch, and it received very little if any balance patches over the years. Balance patches really weren't so much of a thing. So instead of the main attitude being, X is overpowered, wait until it's nerfed, the main attitude seemed to be, how do we beat it anyway? And it generally seemed to work out. Now, every time someone gets destroyed by something, there's a yell of imbalance, and that's where it ends. No try to beat it, no further thought. Game's imbalanced, that's it. The lives system. You lose them all? Start over, motherfricker. Non-backlit Game Boy screens. That panic when the sun starts setting just as you were about to start a boss battle with Lieutenant Surge, and also the painstakingly slow progress as you wait to pass street lamps and hold your Game Boy up to the window to see what you're doing. Putting AA batteries in the freezer just to get a few more minutes on Tetris. Getting a new game, specifically at Toys R Us. Back in the day, you pulled a slip from the game area and paid for that. Then after you paid, you brought the slip to another counter, where they gave you the game. It was such a ritual. Also, spending 2 hours arguing with your brother at Blockbuster about what video game to rent. An almost toxicity-free community. I don't remember the last online game with a player base that wasn't filled with spoiled children. Games are amazing now. When we were kids, we'd crap our pants playing just about anything that's out for current consoles or PC. Yet the modern gaming community is negative and toxic about 95% of all games that come out. Basically, if it's not a Zelda game or the current indie side-scroller, be prepared to read negative reviews. I mean, not for nothing, but the Bloodborne Reddit is the kindest, most helpful community of juntas ever. You can't swing a dead Yarnamite without hitting someone who's offering to log in to help someone with a boss. Even if you don't like the game or haven't played, go lurk and see. We're all the kindest blood-drunk monster juntas around. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The single-player golden age. It's all player versus player or socially driven group PvE games like Destiny and The Division. The age before 20 DLC packs and in-game microtransactions were the norm, and an expansion pack was something you got at the store and pretty much doubled the game content with. Text only. Game Genie. How has this not been mentioned yet? It's preloaded with cheats and game alterations, you plug your game into it, then plug it into the console. When the game goes to boot, the Game Genie menu comes up first and you can give yourself any number of cheats. Infinite lives, max hearts, level skips, stuff like that. An entire day of split screening with your friends, pizza included. Your file is corrupted. Format memory card? Your couch is broken. Burn your house down? Game guides used to be written on slices of dead tree instead of a wiki. Those grid-based passwords from Mega Man. Installing the original World of Warcraft and hoping you got lucky and the installation would be complete before bedtime. Tomorrow. Editing config sys and autoexec bat files in order to get the correct values for extended memory and expanded memory so your game would even load. I came here to complain about this. There were some games I never even got to run despite fiddling with config files for hours. I haven't played Sonic 3 in a while, let's pop that bad boy in. Insert card into system for the first time in 8 years. Sega. and no fricking updates. I can do you one better than this example. In 2015, my friend and I randomly started reminiscing about Star Wars Rogue Squadron. He then proceeds to dig out his Nintendo 64 from his closet, dusts it off, and we get to zooming around blasting TIE fighters 17 frickin' years after the release of the game, and it starts instantly, working perfectly. I love some of our modern gaming innovations, and they'd be impossible without internet connections and patches, but that experience made me a little bitter about updating consoles these days. Did you know there was a sequel to that old alien creation game Spore called Darkspore? It was basically Spore but a dungeon crawler, straight up Diablo. Did you know the maps for Need for Speed Carbon and Need for Speed Most Wanted were actually combined once in Need for Speed World? The game had full day and night cycles, making it the only way to experience Carbon at daylight or Most Wanted at night. Did you know Fear once had a strictly multiplayer game, Fear Online, which was released after the third Fear game but used the Fear 2 engine? People said it was horrendous, but if you're like me, just trying to make another Fear game on a classic engine no less after the mess that was Fear 3R is a very large leap in the right direction. Do any of these games sound fun or interesting to you? Something you might consider playing or at least checking out for a couple of minutes? Well, F you can't. They're frickin' dead. I don't mean dead in that nobody plays them anymore, I mean dead as in nobody can play them anymore. Every single one of these games required you to connect to a central online publisher-run server, and now that publisher shut down the server, you can't even load past the main menu. None of you will ever know what it's like to play these games, and too frickin' bad. It doesn't stop there. Battleforge, Hawken, Ghost in the Shell, FIFA 14, Madden 13, Battlefield 2 multiplayer, and many more. But that's just off the top of my head for now. Every single one of these games is dead permanently. You want to start up a match on a private server with some old buddies and relive your glory days? F you can't. Why is this okay? Most of these were full-priced $60 games when they came out. They weren't small nothings, not tiny mobile games that offer little to the world of gaming, and are meant to be disposable anyway. I will bet anyone real-world money that a good amount of parents brought FIFA 14 for their kid, expecting to be able to have some good clean fun with their kid for years, and now that the server is down, the parent can go F themselves. There's no excuse for this bullcrap games as a service model, if you even want to try to defend it by calling it that. Because when you're holding a literal hard copy of the game on the disc, you're holding every single piece of data you need for the game, except for the license to play it part. Now, sure, publishers have a bottom line, they can't keep a central server running forever. That would be an acceptable excuse for killing games if there was no other option, which there fricking is. How many games can you name where you can host a private server for everyone to play on, no central authentication required? Off the top of my head, I can think of DayZ and Minecraft, to name a few big-ticket games. It doesn't matter if it's 500 years from now. If people still own copies of Minecraft and the requisite hardware, they'll be able to pop that stuff in and play online. Meanwhile, most of you will never be able to experience Spore's sequel, which is a single-player game no less, because some publisher couldn't give two craps about patching the game or even releasing the source code so the game's fans could patch it in, and they decided killing their IP was their best option. No gambling. I don't remember any game that had those luck-spinning machines with real-life money. Also, the only time you'd be paying money is when you bought the game, some kind of membership or in some games, currency. Also, internet bills. Getting games in cereal boxes. Actual games. Does anyone remember the series released by Disney when Treasure Planet was coming out? I still have the Asteroid game somewhere. So you have this epic game that you're so excited about and you're getting into it. You've got a real good feel for the stuff. But you're 2 hours into the storyline and you have to stop progress so you can load another disc. It really takes away from the in-the-moment feel that we all take for granted nowadays. For example, imagine playing Geralt in The Witcher. You're jazzed, pumped up, and on the move to tackle a huge storyline. You walk up to the building you're supposed to enter for an encounter, but the screen times out and goes black, then grey, then a DOS screen. You listen to your computer hum, chirp, and crackle, then have to wait 2 or 3 minutes for a load screen. Load screen finally shows up, and then it tells you, insert disk 2. So you eject the disk, maybe your computer has trouble with that, maybe not, and you insert disk 2. The computer loads, and then it thinks, and thinks, and thinks so hard, then the machine makes a loud jerking noise, then quiet. To continue, press enter, and frustratingly you make your way back to your scenario. For maybe 10 minutes you've been removed from the game. You work another hour into the storyline and then you get another pause. Insert disk 3. Oh boy. So the narrator has looked at how much space The Witcher 3 takes up on his hard drive, and I think it would be about, let's see, 85 or so optical CD-ROMs to put all the game files on? Or maybe 11 or 12 DVD-ROMs. But that's an apple to oranges comparison, I guess, since none of those discs have enough space to even run the game engine in the first place. You just wouldn't release The Witcher 3 back then. Going to the shop to buy your games. Getting that game you really wanted, and it comes in a big box with fancy graphics, and maybe if it was a big game, there'd be more than one install CD. Wow. Seriously though, I bought RimWorld the other day and I thought, dang, wish I could have this in the proper cardboard game box. It just looks like such a hard copy cover design for a box. Buying a new game and getting a full game, not some of it with the rest paywalled. The Nintendo Hotline. In 4th grade, I was playing Final Fantasy VII, and I'd pilfered the method for breeding a gold chocobo from somewhere and handwritten it down in 4th grade chicken scratch hieroglyphs. Much to my dismay, I never came out with a gold chocobo. So I'm at school one day and Tim, I didn't even like Tim, he was pretty snot-nosed, he was babbling about how his older brother can get a gold chocobo 100% of the time. Curious, I thought to myself. How could anybody have the knowledge, skill, and patience to do such a thing? I needed to know more, so I picked Tim's brain a little bit, and it was clear he didn't know any more than I did. So I asked if I could come and spend the night at his house. I spent the night at Tim's house, who I didn't like, so I could have his brother show me how to breed a gold chocobo. Nowadays, I'd just YouTube and be done with it. Play by mail, when lag was a few days delay due to a snowstorm. World of Warcraft's game launcher. Also, Curse client. Loading a game on the Spectrum ZX using a cassette tape. Blasting away at Defender with a crowd of fellow teens gathered around you at the arcade as you raked up impossible scores. The boys whisper, the girls swoon, your focus is at 300%. You can't screw up now. The game is throwing everything at you. You dodge this way, that way, putting your entire body into it. The crowd gets bigger and bigger as newcomers realize something historic and epic is happening on that corner. They don't know who you are. They just know that you're a sorcerer, a Valkyrie, a digital warrior, the walking dude, the Punisher, the Saint, the Equalizer, Darth motherfrickin' Vader for Pete's sake. Where did you come from? Are you even human? For 10 minutes, you're a real-life hero. When you pay $60 for a game, it comes in a nice case and has a user manual like a school textbook, a poster-sized map of the game world for you to tack up on your wall, and now you pay $60 for half a game and you don't even really own it. Having to jot down passcodes to continue in games like Metroid or Kid Icarus because no save files. For things like Metroid and maybe the original Legend of Zelda specifically, having to scribble down crude maps of every area on paper so you don't get lost every 44 seconds. Good old CRT monitors. That thing in 2D fighter games where you walk off one side of the screen and appear on the other. Being stuck on a level or mission for days, internet access has made playthroughs incredibly easy. Burning their eyes playing arcade machines that work with coins, plus needing the skills to avoid paying for a credit and 3 extra lives. Having multiple autoexact.bat and config.sys setups, each tailored to a specific game. Video games at Blockbuster Video. The epiphany of up, up, down, down, left, right, BA, start. Funkoland. Dying of dysentery along the trail. How to beat a game like Morrowind without an internet guide. You can't sell a sense of pride and accomplishment like that. What was your big, oh, my parents are gonna kill me moment that you had as a kid? I put my cheap gel pens in the microwave when I was 11 because they wouldn't work and my teacher told me that that's because the ink was frozen. Let's just say I had to work extra that summer so that I could get us a new microwave. First time ever getting drunk, 14 years old. Had a bottle of rum and 4 Mike Hard lemonades all mixed into a big jug. I came home that night, my mum just looked at me, and she knew. She didn't get mad, she just said, "Okay, Corey, let's go to bed, it's all right, let's go." I went to bed, and the next day she made me go into school with a ridiculous hangover. That was my punishment. But she always said to me later in life, "What was the point in me yelling at you? You were drunk, there was nothing I could do." For a month, I kept taking the internet cord from my parents' room and running it to the living room, plugged it into the TV box. I was washing the dishes when my dad started reading out the adult movie titles on the bill that month. Oh bro, I've got you beat. My 14-year-old butt came skipping into the computer room happy as a clam one night to see my father staring at the very raunchy story I'd written about my religion teacher. Yep, I basically yipped in fear and went white, and he looked around at me and promptly lost his freaking mind laughing. I ran away to my room as fast as I could and I hid in my bed until the next day. I was terrified he was going to tell my mum and I was so embarrassed. That was in 2009 and he's never mentioned it again. As a 2000s kid, stories like these always fascinate me. We were there but not actually there. Every single day, my mum told me to be careful near the frozen pond next to our house. One day, enough snow melted in order for my friends and I to play soccer on the field next to the pond. As you can guess, at one point the ball ended up dead center in the middle of the pond on the ice. My child brain figured if I could throw a stick on the ice, it was safe to walk on. So, after making sure the ice was stable by throwing not one, but 2 sticks, I started my walk to get the ball. It was like a scene from a movie. I reached the center, and the second I picked up the ball and attempted to turn around, I fell straight through the ice and went under. I had to break the ice the entire way back to shore and had my clothes dried at a friend's house a few blocks away. By the time I got there, I thought I was on my deathbed, but I could never tell my mum I was dumb enough to go out there, or she'd probably have killed me. I'm now 32 and have still never told my parents I did that. It's funny how many of us risked actual death to avoid being told, "I told you so," by our parents. But then again, I guess a lot of adults risk death or injury to avoid the same reprimand from their spouses, so maybe not that much has changed. This story takes place in the mid-90s. I was 16, skipping school out messing around in my car with friends. Took a turn too fast and put the car in the ditch. We got the car out of the ditch with the help of a passerby. Not a scratch on it by some frickin' miracle. Got home and my dad asks, "So, how was school?" in a way that told me he knew full well I wasn't at school. If there's one thing my father instilled in me, it's this. No matter how bad you mess up, lying about it will only make it worse. Own up, take your punishment, and don't do it again. So I told him exactly what happened. He couldn't really take the car away. I'd purchased it from him for full trade-in value, out of the money I'd saved from working at a pizza joint. But he found other ways to make my life a living hell for the next few months after that. I came to find out the good Samaritan who'd helped us out of the ditch was a co-worker of my dad who'd recognized the car and had called my dad to let him know about my little adventures. I was 17, drove my girlfriend home from school. We ended up in the shower together. Just as we turned off the water and she was stepping out, we hear her dad open the front door of the house. Of course, my truck is in the driveway, so he knows that I'm there, but he's already walking around and knows I'm nowhere else in the house. My short life flashed before my eyes. He came stomping down the hallway and banged on the bathroom door. My girlfriend, wrapped in a towel, answered the door and lied her butt off. Yeah, Steven's down the street at one of our friends' places. I told him I'd call him when I was out of the shower. Meanwhile, I'm standing frozen and shriveled in the shower behind the curtain, preparing to meet the hereafter. Been together 26 years. When I was 12, we were visiting my mum's family for Christmas and staying at an aunt's house like we usually did. Behind her house was a creek that ran through most of the neighborhood. This particular year, it had been really cold and there was snow at least 6 inches deep in most places. I was playing out in the snow and looked back at the creek and saw some really weird icicles that I wanted to get a closer look at. I crossed a fallen log to get to the opposite side of the creek, facing the back of my aunt's house, and walked along the bank looking at the ice. Basically, the creek was flowing and not frozen, but there was a shelf that had frozen above it, and the ice hanging from it had formed into teardrop shapes instead of the typical spikes I was so used to seeing. As I walked, I neglected to see a patch of ice on the bank in front of me and stepped on it with my full weight. I slipped and slid fully into the creek, which was way deeper than I'd anticipated. I was wearing a winter coat, jeans, and insulated boots, all of which became incredibly heavy when they got wet. I was up to my armpits, trying desperately to stay afloat in the freezing cold water and heavy clothes. My only thought was, my mum is going to be so mad. Obviously, I survived the incident. I pulled myself out, stumbled up the bank to a building that I thought was a YMCA and turned out to actually be a fire station. They called my mum, she came to get me, no harm, no foul, and I wasn't in any trouble, although my entire family still mocks me and asks if I'd like to go for a swim every Christmas. When I was 15, my parents were going out for the night, so this seemed to be the perfect opportunity for my boyfriend and my virgin self to do it. We were in the family room, undressed and getting ready to go upstairs to my room when we heard the garage door open. 2 people never moved so fast. We grabbed our clothes and flew upstairs. We sat in my room like, crap, now what? I decided to get dressed and go down to nonchalantly find out what happened. My dad was getting a migraine, so they came home early. My boyfriend was 15 too, so there wasn't a car involved to give us away. He lived in the same development a few blocks away. He'd walked to my house. My parents went to bed, so once we were sure imminent death wasn't upon us, we picked up where we left off. I wouldn't change a thing about that night. It was amazing and special. The sneakiness of it all added another dimension. Unfortunately, my boyfriend had to jump out of my bedroom window to leave. Our dog took a hard no on him leaving the conventional way. But he was able to get onto the portico over the front door and then just jump off that. When I came home to tell them that my girlfriend was pregnant for Thanksgiving of my freshman year of college. So we live in a 2-story colonial. My parents were away on vacation. I'm in the yard and tossing a baseball up in the air and catching it, just a 9-year-old entertaining myself. I think to myself, hey, let's loft it into the first split-level roof and it'll roll off and I'll catch it. On my second toss, crash. I shatter my sister's window. Grandma was babysitting. Grandma reported, I was smoked. I skipped school by leaving the house, climbing on the garage and waiting for my mum to leave. I jumped down to let myself in as she drove off and I set myself up for the day on my PlayStation 1. She then came back as she had forgotten something and I wanted to die in a hole. The yelling was something to behold. I didn't do that again. Getting pulled over by 3 police cars for doing 70 in a 45 zone. My dad happened to call as I was talking with the officers. They asked to speak with him. After a few minutes, they handed the phone back and said, you'd better go home. That's going to be worse than the ticket we were giving you. That was a whole lot of yelling back at my place that night. I don't know about you guys, but it would have to be a pretty massive telling off to be worse than me losing my scarce amount of saved up cash at that age. But then again, I'm looking at this through the lens of an adult. Nobody who's telling me off can legally punish me in any other way than shouting. But yeah, no amount of yelling is going to be worse than a ticket in my book. When I was about 8, my sister, who was 10, and I used to play around the neighborhood with other kids. But we had to be home by 8 p.m. or when the streetlights came on, whichever came first. We had a watch on us, and every evening my mum would make sure that we had one with us and it was working. One evening we were 20 minutes late, and it was the second time that week. If we were late twice in a week, we weren't allowed to go out the rest of the week. My sister and I were talking by the back garden gate, making up excuses why we were late, and making sure we were both on the same page in case she questioned us. We opened the gate to go inside and my mum was standing on the other side of the gate with her arms folded. That was sort of a life flashed before my eyes moment. A friend and I did this upon sneaking back into the house. We thought we'd made it. We slid into the dark house without waking the dog, eased my normally cranky bedroom door open, we both slipped in, latched it quietly, turned on the light and say, "Frick yeah, we did it!" And my mom was sitting on my bed. Oof. Parents heard that my girlfriend was pregnant. She wasn't, by the way. They'd heard it from mutual friends of theirs and my girlfriend's parents. Dad and I had a long and spirited discussion, I can tell you. The story, as it turns out, was as follows. My girlfriend thought she was pregnant, she'd told her parents, they told a friend, the friend told my parents, and my dad told me. I was driving home early in the morning after a night of playing games at a friend's. I was going too fast on an icy road, lost control of my car, and ended up 40 yards into an icy, flooded field. The car filled with water. I was 16 and had gotten my license just a couple of months earlier. Parents were actually pretty cool about it. The car recovered, but it always had a smell after that. There was a small lizard trapped in our garage under a pile of wood, so I moved some of them so it could get out. I must have accidentally knocked over a larger plank in the process, which landed on my dad's car and went straight through the windshield. The lizard was fine, though. One time I snuck out of the house, and when I went to sneak back in the door, it was locked. We never locked the doors in my house, so I knew I'd been caught. We lived on a farm, so I just went up to the hayloft to sleep the rest of the night. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A little off topic, but a good story. I one time woke up late for school because my alarm didn't go off. I'm incredibly blind without my contacts and just glanced up at the clock and it was very late. In a furious panic to somehow make it to the bus, I put my contacts in, dunked my hair in water, grabbed my backpack and jacket as I sprinted to the bus stop. It's the time of year where it's dark outside well into the morning, so it was still pitch black. No one was at the bus stop, so I figured I missed it. I still waited for some time in case it showed up. When I realized I was so late it wasn't coming, I walked back into my house, knowing I'd have to wake my mum up to take me to school. Fortunately, when I walked through the front door, she was already up waiting for me. She greeted me with, "Where the hell have you been?" I responded that I was sorry but late for the bus and needed her to take me to school. She glared at me and told me it was something like 4 in the morning. I had somehow misread my alarm clock in my state of panic and tried to explain that I really did think I was late and was really at the bus stop. She just assumed I'd snuck out with friends the night before and was just coming home. Something I had been doing off and on for a while at the time, I admit. So I was grounded for sneaking out when in reality I'd just woken up too early to go to school. My sister locked me out of the house, she was still inside, so I went around banging on all the doors and she was ignoring me. I started pounding on her bedroom window and my hand accidentally goes through the window. About 10 years later and I still have a tiny scar on my hand. 17 years old, had a party while the parents were out of town. I had to work the next day but timed it so I'd have plenty of time to clean before they got home that evening. Came home from work, the sprinklers are on and their car is in the driveway. Driving down my driveway, I was anxiety and fear personified. I walk in the house and my mum tells me, "Your dad had to leave before you got here, otherwise he was afraid of what he might do to you." I thought it was a good idea to play with some candles while having a Lord of the Rings marathon. Turns out that was a bad idea because I ended up getting distracted and set the family couch on fire. I frantically put it out and threw a blanket over it. I didn't leave that couch for a week. There's a certain level of procrastination that's honestly sort of impressive. For instance, lying on a crusty, burned couch with a blanket draped over it and missing out on other elements of your life just to delay a punishment that you're surely going to get regardless. Nonetheless, I'm kind of wowed you got away with it for that long. My mum left 14-year-old me and my 8-year-old brother alone at home to run an errand. I don't remember what he did, but he royally teed me off, and I had a bad temper as a teenager. So I chucked a cordless phone at his face. He started bleeding everywhere and we both panicked. I'd knocked out one of his teeth. So he ran to the bathroom to see which one, bawling the whole time. As it turns out, it was his extra tooth. He was scheduled to have it pulled a few days later. So then the angry tears turned to grateful tears at avoiding a trip to the dentist. We did still have to call my mum, though, so that she knew why he was suddenly missing a bonus tooth. He confirmed that he was glad I knocked it out, and she went, I have to think about this. Yeah, I was grounded anyway. But this is now one of those stories that we tell because we think it's hilarious. My parents had us each 6 or 7 years apart, so growing up we had a lot of dumb fights. The younger ones still do. It's this particular brother's birthday today, so he's at my house, and he was proud that this was my response to this particular question. His exact thoughts about the story were, after I realized it was the extra tooth, it was frickin' amazing. In our single digits, my older brother locked me out of the house while parents were out. I threw a stick at the back door and shattered the storm door glass. I knew I was going to get a licking, but my bro got the licking instead for locking me out. He was a real jerk to me as a kid, and we're now in our 50s, but he still brings up how guilty he feels for it. That kind of makes up for how much I despised him back then. My parents were away for the weekend. I took my dad's keys and took it for a small drive. I was never allowed to drive unsupervised. I didn't have a license or anything. It was a thrill. I came back, parked, left the keys in the same drawer he left them in, and then Monday arrived. I came back to school and my dad asks me to come look at the car with a death glare. I'd forgot to pull the seat back after adjusting them for my 14-year-old legs. I snuck out and took the car when I was 16 before I had a license to drive at night. I hit a pothole and blew a tire. I rode around on a shredded tire for about 2 or 3 minutes before I drove up on a guy smoking a cigarette in his driveway. He helped me change it. The next morning my parents woke up early and were going to take the car somewhere, and the spare was still on. Luckily, this was right when the Goodyear or Firestone tires were all blowing out, and I told my parents that it happened earlier in the day before, and that I just didn't have the chance to tell them. This guy was 17 and taking driving lessons. Driving age in Germany is 18, and he'd actually passed his driving test. He would be issued his license when he turned 18. The evening before his 18th birthday, he was having a party with his friends as they were partying past midnight to celebrate his birthday. After they had some drinks, his friends convinced him, "Hey mate, you can drive now, let's go for a drive." He stole his mother's car keys and they piled into the car. They made it 200 meters down the road before he crashed into the wall of a house. He was not issued his license, he was only allowed to get one 5 years later. Getting drunk at the age of 14 at a house party. My mum met me a few minutes walk away. She could hear my ridiculously drunk self the entire walk. The 5 seconds between my mum catching me smoking and actually speaking back when I was 14. I was sitting in my back garden with my best friend and we'd recently acquired an air rifle. So obviously we started shooting it at things in an increasingly destructive manner, because we were 11 years old. We shook up and banged out a can of Coke, and then we laughed as it went nuts, spraying its contents everywhere. Then we got a spray can of deodorant, and it was even more ridiculous because it basically went bang, but in a relatively harmless way. Then we got a can of shoe polish. Turns out, shoe polish is a little bit flammable. A little bit more flammable than you might expect. The explosion set fire to my stepdad's shed. The can itself went straight up like a surface-to-air missile. Armed police arrived shortly afterwards. At the time, I lived in reasonably central London, and this was in 1991, which happened to be slap bang in the middle of the biggest ever spate of IRA attacks on the city, and a couple of months after some IRA members fired mortar shells at the actual frickin' House of Parliament. The bollocking we got from the police was extreme. But it was nothing compared to the look on my mother's eyes the whole time it was going on, because my friend and I knew that when the police left, that things were going to get very bad indeed. The sense of apprehension was even worse than a riot cop carrying a rifle, screaming in our faces about how stupid we were. It was horrifying. We were doomed. And so it came to pass. She went absolutely fricking mental. My mother is a mild-mannered person, but not that day. Not that day. It still terrifies me to think of it almost 30 years later. You probably should have asked the cops if they could have just taken you to prison instead. There's nothing scarier than a mild person who's absolutely livid like that. I was texting my brother asking for help with something so that my mum wouldn't get mad. I called her the B word in the text, and then sent it to my mum. I don't recommend that. I'd just gotten my first ever job at Ace Hardware, and a week in, my buddies hit me up asking if I wanted to head to the beach for the next week. And I was like, yeah, of course. So I told my boss at work a family member had died and I couldn't come in the next week. So my boss called my dad, who also works for the owner of the company in a different department, and starts telling him, I am so sorry for your loss. Please let me know if I can do anything to help. And my dad was like, what do you mean? What happened? And he ended up telling my boss I lied about the entire thing. I still got the week off and went on vacation, but the next few days at my job were nerve-wracking to say the least. I think I was about 4 or 5. There was a rock quarry and gravel pit about a mile from home that my parents didn't want me going to because of a bunch of unseemly youths hanging out there. So of course, this is where my flying experiment took place. I tied 4 kites to my bike and thought if I rode fast enough and then took my bike off the steepest bank of the quarry, the kites would lift me off and I'd glide to the bottom. Probably lucky for me, but the strings of the kite wound into the bike spokes and completely locked it up, throwing me so that I slid all the way down the edge of the gravel pit rather than make a measured jump. I scraped up to my elbows and from my knees down, and all I could think of on that painful walk home, dragging my busted bike full of kites, was how my mum was going to kill me. Suffice to say, when your 5-year-old walks in looking like the finale of Carrie, you don't immediately jump to punishment. Also, my parents are and have always been fantastic and not neglectful. This happened almost 25 years ago in a very nice suburb. It was pretty much the only off-limits zone my parents had for me, which, I mean, moth to the flame, right? I was on my period and got it very heavy for the first time, and was laying back on our new couch in our new house. The couch was pretty expensive, and my parents were really nervous about anyone sitting on it with food or drinks. I got up to go do homework, and I noticed there were about 5 drops of blood stained into the couch. And at that moment, I was done with everything. My parents were actually going to kill me. Plus, I got blood into my favorite sweatpants. They were mad, but they knew I was innocent, and they got it fixed. It's perfect now. What's the strangest thing you've got a guy for? I used to have a guy for buying horses. Seriously though, you need a good one. Let's see, I've got a coupon guy, a mango guy, an egg guy, and a tamales guy. My friend's wife also makes artsy male members on commission, but I've never actually taken her up on that. When I was a waiter in downtown Phoenix 20 years ago, I had a street person on retainer. Parking was difficult on lunch shift. Our restaurant couldn't or wouldn't validate employee parking, so we had to use the meters on the street. Since the meters had a 2-hour limit, you needed to park close enough to be able to run down and feed them in the middle of the lunch rush. Spaces were very limited. One day, soon after starting, I passed the same bum for a 3rd night in a row panhandling. He wasn't at all vocal, just tried doing funny dances and making people smile. Then he'd tell you to have a nice night, never rude or aggressive. I gave him a couple of bucks a few nights in a row and started to notice him during the day too once we became familiar. The first time I saw him after pulling in for a lunch shift, I gave him a handful of change from my coin cup in the console and told him if he fed my meter with it all day, I'd throw him some cash again after my shift. Found out then that his name was Mike. 2 hours later, it's noon 30 and the crew is dashing down to feed their meters or asking whomever is going down to do it for them. I gave someone a couple of quarters and asked them to check on mine while they were at it, just in case. They were back in 5 minutes reporting that my car was good, the hostess's car was good, and 2 other servers bookending my car were good. All of us until 2 p.m. Yeah, some homeless guy's feeding all the meters on this side of the block. The next day, as I was making my way around the gauntlet of one-way roads surrounding the building housing my restaurant, I saw Mike. He was standing in a parking space right by the bottom of the escalator leading up to my work, and as soon as he saw my car, he pulled his pants leg up and did a little chorus line dance move to get my attention. He had been standing there holding the spot for me for the past 15 minutes. Thus it began. Mike held a parking spot for me nearly every morning for the next 2 years. He fed my meter and the meter of any other staff I asked him to. I started keeping car cleaning stuff in my car, Windex, Armor All, and I'd give him towels from the restaurant to detail it up once a week. He knew what bar I hung out at and where I sat. He'd track me down when meters were about to expire or he needed a buck. Everyone at the restaurant and the bar across the street started calling him my bum. He was my friend though too. His name was Mike. He just didn't live anywhere because life is more complicated for some people. But yeah, I had a guy once. A true downtown concierge. The story of Mike is a weird thing. It makes me chuckle, but he clearly wasn't in the best place in life. Still, his jigs and dedication to the job speak of a diligence and a bit of good character that are nice to imagine exist these days. And the fact that someone on waiter money could help him make some valuable cash makes for a nice symbiotic relationship. I have a mushroom guy. Not like the illegal hallucinogenic kind, but some rare, high-quality food-grade mushrooms. I got a guy named Fat Tony who occasionally texts me about rare but cheap musical instruments. He's always trying to loop me in on his side hustle of finding instruments on eBay and repairing them for resale. One day I get a text that says, "Yo, Paulie, this is Fat Tony. I got a Hammond organ for you, $100. And that's how I got my organ. I still have no idea how he got my number or who he really is. We've never met in person. Fat Tony. I'm very old. By the internet standards, I should be dead. When I was a kid, I was Sabbat Goy for the elderly Jewish couple next door. They were very orthodox and there were a bunch of things they wouldn't do on Sabbath, like turn a light off or relight the furnace. It was okay for me to do it for them, as long as it was voluntary and not a paid arrangement because I'm not Jewish. They gave us produce from their kitchen garden, but that was not payment per se. He had the tattoo, and maybe she did too, but she always wore long sleeves. I was glad to help them. I'm a wildlife biology student. I have a plant guy, a bug guy, a reptile guy, a fish guy, and several more. If I stumble upon something I don't know in the field, I know someone who'll know what it is. I have a guy that will bring me a free bouncy house rental upon request, and then leave it at my house until someone else rents it out. So it's a party for days. We've had racing obstacle courses, a joust, and many others. I got a pineapple guy. He gets me the good stuff, variously called the sugarloaf pineapple, white pineapple, Kona sugarloaf, Kona white, honey cream, few others. It's a pineapple that's sweeter and, crucially, has lower acidity, so it doesn't hurt your mouth or tongue if you eat too much of it. It's good to have a pineapple guy. For those of you asking how to get your own pineapple guy, you gotta know a guy. And for those asking how my guy gets his pineapple, I don't ask and he doesn't tell. That's the whole point of having a guy. I give him money and he gives me the pineapple. No questions asked. I have a guy who'll spray psychedelic mushroom spores on your property for you. He won't sell you mushrooms or sell or give you spores to place yourself, but he'll come out to your property, find areas where they'll naturally grow, and inoculate the area. I am the guy. The horse splooge guy. My family all own horse ranches and breed, and once at a convention I overheard a woman say she couldn't find a decent paint male to breed her mare to. I stepped up and shared my connection. A paint is a multicolored horse with large spots, typically brown or black on white. They're beautiful and highly sought after. My family has some rare bloodlines that are beloved for their colors and happy, even temperament. Spare computer monitors. They aren't the best quality, but if I ever have a friend or family member that needs a spare computer monitor, I call him up and get one from him. Thus making me the computer monitor guy for several other people. A chicken guy. His business cards say chicken rescue on them. I'm pretty sure he's also some type of mobster. Acquiring promotional displays. I used to have a pie guy. He'd come around to my shop and all the shops and businesses in the area. He had savory Cajun pies and sweet pies. He had a few regular choices on hand at all times and also took custom orders. The étouffée pies were incredible. I have a sloth guy. 3 separate family events over the last 15 years. I've called my guy and he's brought a sloth to the party. To reassure people, he runs a USDA-certified wild animal rescue and has had his sloth for close to 20 years. He takes extraordinary care of all his animals. The sloth is not a performing animal. Nobody gets to approach, handle it, or pet it. He simply brings it for a short period of time so that people can see it, and he discusses its life, behavior, and care. He does phenomenal work to protect and preserve wildlife. Many of his animals came to him after being purchased by people who wanted an exotic pet and then quickly realized they couldn't care for it. I have a salsa lady. She's been winning awards for it since before I was born. Sorry everyone, she says she sells out locally and doesn't see the need to ship. I have a mattress gal. She runs a high-end mattress shop and is supposed to dispose of any returned mattresses. I take care of disposal by showing up at the customer's place, bringing the disposal mattresses around to any friends or family in need of a mattress upgrade. I got a sweet $4,000 king bed for free and hauling it because it was a return. Frickin' yes, I worked for a junk removal company for a couple of years, and we had a contract with some furniture companies in the area. If a rich person bought something but didn't like it, we were supposed to return it, but these places didn't actually want used pieces of furniture back then, so we were supposed to put it in the dump. Well, we were already paid to pick it up, and putting things into the dump costs money. So if anyone asked if they could take this piece of furniture into their own house, the answer was always yes. Furnished my entire house and parts of friends' houses in my early 20s this way. I've got a guy that will F up your life. Feel free to ask for his number. I have a fat guy. If I need to get fat, I call up the fat guy and I get some. He did chest reductions, tummy sucks, and such. Fat has a lot of stem cells. I used to have a brain guy. I do medical research, by the way. I had no idea where that submission was going after the first sentence. But okay, it all came together in the end there. I thought maybe you were a soap maker a la Fight Club or something. Bee guy. If you need a hive removed, he's the guy to call to safely and humanely remove the bees without killing them. I'm a beekeeper. I also have a queen guy who supplies me with new queens. Even better, I keep bees in Brooklyn, and my queen guy meets me in Queens at a Burger King. He sells me a queen in a Chinese takeout container. Great price, too. I have an illegal cheese and jerky lady. She owns a farm that sells legitimate animal products farm to table, but she also makes cheese and jerky on the side and sells it only to people she trusts. In Canada, we have incredibly strict laws around dairy and jerky products. I've got a clam guy. He gets fresh clams in the morning and then walks around town with a cooler on a cart and sells them door to door. I get him business cards for Christmas one year and he made me write down Clam Master on them. He's a character. He does deliver door to door. He'll sometimes sell the majority of his haul to a seafood restaurant near me, but he'll usually hold back a dozen or so for me. First time I met him, probably 7 or 8 years ago, he was carrying clams in a 5-gallon bucket, walking my block. He asked if I wanted to buy some clams and I said yes, and we've been friends ever since. He later started coming around with a big cooler on a cart and even had a moped with a tiny trailer for a little bit. He doesn't deliver on demand, but he reliably comes by once or twice a week during clam season, always fresh caught that morning. I work in the props department in film and television. What do you want? I'll get it. To clarify, I'm not actually a prop dealer, I don't sell my stuff. My uncle has a criminal history and now he owns a car business, but he's still in contact with old friends. He once told me if I need something, he knows people I don't want to know. A friend who was a bit of a good girl was doing a sociology project and hung out with a local substance lord for a bit as part of it. When illegal things were happening, he'd tell her to leave for a while. He ended up really taking a shine to her, and at the end of the project, he gave her his number and said if she ever needed anything, to call him. A few months later, she called him just to say hi, and he yelled at her not to call unless she needed something done to someone. Being a good person with a connection to organized bad people just blows my mind. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I am the bird feeder guy for a very wealthy man. When he's on vacation, I'll go in the morning to fill up the feeders and at night to take them down. Since a lot of people are asking, we take them down at night because of the raccoons and skunks. I have a guy who knows how to shake vending machines in just the right way. Most schools bolt the machines to the floor, but I have a sneaking suspicion the faculty are putting this off so that they can get snacks too. I've literally caught the coaches stealing honey buns. I have a tamale guy. Everyone should have a tamale guy. Oh, my tamale guy ghosted me. I'm not sure what happened, but he used to deliver like 24 tamales every few weeks and it was amazing. I live in Canada, so it's hard to find a good tamale. I had ordered my usual and he said it'd be by the next day. I never heard from the guy ever again. I have a guy who'll diagnose my weird ailments, even if he's planting pumpkins, cleaning out a chicken coop, or nursing injured birds back to health. I've even sent him pictures at 4 a.m. of the horrible conjunctivitis that I developed over a 12-hour period. And by 8:30 a.m., he delivered a prescription of antibiotic eye drops to my house. That sounds a lot better than the doctor's online portal where they'll tell you they'll get back to you, sometimes within 2 weeks, and then just tell you they can't answer your question but you should use the online tool to schedule an appointment. Ugh. I just have one guy for any strange thing I'd need to do or want to get. Streamline. Basically, my guy. This dude that I buy seasoned chicken wings from. He runs a shawarma shop and he makes things with the same spices. Holy smokes, are they good. I have a wine guy. Literally has over 10,000 bottles and acts as a broker or dealer. He has fun stuff and can get things at a much better price than anywhere else. I don't know if it's the strangest, but definitely one of my favorite go-to guys is my chicharrones guy. That's like pork rinds. He's also my drywall and painter guy, but I reach out more frequently for his homemade chicharrones. I have a good friend who's a urologist. As middle-aged men, our group of friends has asked him many a question about the male downstairs area. Oh my god, it's finally my time. This isn't my guy, but still relevant. I'm a teacher. When I was doing my student teaching, it was at a school with a very high socio-economic student body, and I just couldn't relate to them. One day a kid comes in all upset and I thought, oh, a chance to connect, and I asked him what was wrong. He replied that his dog just wouldn't stop barking and it was ruining his life. I was like, okay, but I still wanted to connect and I was like, oh, that sucks. My dog is really old and has a bad back. He immediately sniffed and wiped the little tears from his eyes and said, hang on, I've got a guy. He pulled out his $300 Prada wallet from his back pocket and handed me a card. He said with the most serious look on his face that this was, quote, the best doggy masseuse in the business, as if A, there was more than one guy in that field, and B, it wasn't his parents that employed this man, but the 5th grader himself. I just said, thank you so much, and walked away flabbergasted. Antiques, of all sorts. Pictures from the early 1900s, typewriters, telephones. You name it, you want a very specific type of pencil from the 1980s? I got just the guy for you. I wonder how one becomes this sort of guy. Is it just a dude who's really into antiques, just finally realizing his dream job? Can you live full-time on it? Just so many questions. I know a guy who'll mold your downstairs area and cast it in the metal of your choosing. That's his specialty. He does other stuff like jewelry and general handicrafts, but he's happy to be known as the metal crotch guy. The guy's a character. I'm sorry to break your hearts, but he primarily works with women's parts. He's done some eggplants, sure, but mostly just friends or local adult movie stars. If he's to be believed, he's molded around 1,000 hoo-has. I personally think that it's probably more like 200, but I don't know him that well. I've got a serious egg guy. It's a 14-year-old kid that lives just outside of my city. His dad wanted to teach him about budgets and business, so he bought him a few chickens, and the kid used his allowance to buy food and a chicken coop. Now he has to take care of them, pay for and collect and sell eggs for profit that goes back into upkeep and food. And he's making a killing selling below market value. $2 a dozen for farm-fresh eggs. He sells to his entire school and church. He's grown his operation to be massive and has hired on a couple of friends part-time to help. Did I say he's 14 years old? You want fresh eggs? I know a guy. You want perfectly legal and giftable Mary J grown from a guy's backyard? I know the same guy. Building custom Star Wars-themed cat towers. I have an AITA and might be getting another one soon. She doesn't have a website or build anything for sale, it was more of a favor from a friend. Also, it's enormous and heavy and wouldn't really be feasible to ship even if she was willing to sell them. I know a really good worm guy out of Pennsylvania. A mink smuggler, as in live mink, that I raise from babies. He smuggles them out of fur farms. I'm the computer guy for a lot of people, but the problem is they think that means I know everything about anything computer-related. I don't do social media except for Reddit, and I can't tell you why your Facebook account is screwed up. I have a guy for eggs that sells good quality farm-raised eggs for cheap, and a guy for mushrooms, the actual eating ones. He's actually an agrarian engineer with a postgrad in something related to mycology and mushroom farming. Honey and beeswax. Helped him make a few bee boxes over one weekend, and he gave me 5 pounds of the most delicious gold I could have ever asked for. Turned that into mead that I shared with my closest connections for Christmas one year. It was the best alcohol I've ever had in my life. I want it so badly again, but I need his honey first. For a while, I was a bunch of people's "my friend got kicked out by their parents for being queer and needs somewhere to stay" girl. I have an argument guy. Doesn't matter what side or what subject, he'll happily argue an opposing standpoint and do it pretty well, no questions asked. I have a chemist guy, I'm not joking, and it's useful given my line of work, but more fun outside of it. FYI, household chemicals are fun. Don't mix them. Lastly, I've got a real gal. Always tells it how it is, even if I don't want to hear it or acknowledge it. She's the most useful out of all of them. I have a compost guy, and I am the chicken guy. I have a cheese gal. She makes the best pistachio cheese logs and a particular Gouda. It shames me to say that I also have a separate Brazilian cheesy ball guy. I have a sausage guy that sells me cold, pickled sausage in anti-static bags. I work in the adult favors industry, and I used to have a guy pay to come and clean my cat litter in a silly little party hat. I have a pig guy. Years ago, my friend hand-built a large smoker big enough to fit a whole 100 to 125-pound pig inside. Once or twice a year, we team up and we do an all-day pig roast for our friends and family. It's super fun. Over the years, I've made a reliable connection from a local pig farmer who'll sell me a fresh cleaned pig carcass and we cook it up. I have a kielbasa guy. What do you want this week? Smoked or fresh? Extra garlic. I got some nice jalapeno and cheese just made. The good cheese. I'm out of Slim Jims though. Don't say nothing. I got kishka coming in next week. Both the red and the white. Pierogies. I used to work at a dry oil field in the United Arab Emirates. There was a guy who'd sneak you booze, usually burying it in front of your trailer. In my hometown, there was a beef jerky guy. He wasn't my guy or anything, but he was a guy I knew where to find. Always a basket of homemade beef jerky with a plastic light-up bulb to display the goods for sale. Usually very fatty jerky too, if you're into that. Oddly enough, yakitori. I have a buddy I met years back who just loves making yakitori. He's actually taken gigs at bars where he'll set up a yakitori grill in the back and start cooking. It's nice, simple, straightforward, and quite cheap. This guy just loves manning the grill, and I could message him pretty much out of the blue, ask where he's at, and get some yummy chicken skewers. I love yakitori guy. It's occurred to me that people like this guy are the culinary or supply alternatives to guys who do music or theater for fun. They're putting in a ton of work and making no money to do the thing they love and be the center of attention while doing it. Not a bad way to spend your spare time. I used to know a Moon Knight guy. Huge fan and had every appearance, including promotional stuff, house ads, and Sienkiewicz art in fan publications. And knew chronology and history by heart, with enough duplicates that he probably sold every single one of them twice over. I have a VR adult movie guy. Spends hours a day playing those things. While I haven't tried it yet, I've been informed he's the man to talk to. I won't enter his house, though. I have a guy that can get you whatever guy you need. Mechanics, plumbers, dealers, pig vets, war vets, you name it, it's a call away. Hot peppers. The other day at the pub, I thought I met a guy who could get cat meat for $50 a pound. Clean, no worms, good to go. His kids love it, so he does it all the time. Even his farm dogs love it. Okay, so what the frick, right? Turns out the drunk mother fricker meant he buys cats from the pound for $50, dewormed them and kept them as pets. His kids and dogs love playing with them so much he now has 5 and has rehomed 4. So he went from a monster to a hero in 3 sentences. Umbrellas. My dad works for the CTA here in Chicago, servicing buses, and if I ever need an umbrella, I can just go to him because he finds so many of them that people accidentally leave on the bus. What was your big, oh no, moment in a surgery? I was doing a corneal transplant when I had the oh crap moment. During surgery, I cut off the patient's own cornea and replaced it with a new donor cornea. During that moment when the host's cornea was off, but before I could get the new one on, there's literally nothing on the front of the eye except a tear film and aqueous humor. Anyway, the patient takes that moment to start emptying their stomach orally. The reason we tell everyone to skip food and drink is that they don't aspirate in case they throw up. This patient lied about eating breakfast and started just chucking it up everywhere. The eye is still open sky at this time. Everything inside of the eye can now become outside of the eye, and she's buckling and blowing chunks everywhere. Those in the know will say this is not good. Those really in the know will say, oh crap. Anyway, I had to grab the new cornea and start stitching as fast as I could on a patient actively chucking up. I used 10-0 nylon sutures which are thinner than an eyelash. It turned out okay, but not great. Don't lie about eating breakfast before surgery, folks. I work in the operating room and I've seen some pretty interesting things. First day on the job, the surgeon was doing a lap sleeve gastrectomy. During this procedure, a medical device is used to cut and staple the stomach simultaneously. However, in this case, the medical device failed. The stomach was cut open, but the staples never engaged, which left the patient with an enormous gash in the stomach. The surgeon ended up finishing this part by hand. There was also the time I got called into the room to ensure the laparoscopic camera was working and able to record. This was a 6-hour cardiac procedure and was nearing the end, so I knew I was about to see something good. The surgeon pulls out some kind of growth from the inside of the guy's heart. This thing was the size of a chicken wing. It was growing through his valve, and I'm honestly amazed they were alive. Supposedly, the only symptoms were shortness of breath. During a C-section for this poor mum who had been in labor for hours, baby would not come out of the hole we'd made, so more pressure was applied to the fundus, which is the top of the uterus. Suddenly, whoosh! Baby zooms out like a torpedo, covered in lubricating vernix, zips over the surgical sheeting, which has the texture of a slip and slide, and almost rockets straight off the table. The baby's foot was caught by the reg, who whipped her up in the air upside down like in old cartoons, but almost dropped her again due to the gloves and vernix. Thankfully, the midwife was ready with the towel and caught the baby to wrap her up. Mum and Dad seemed to think this was normal practice and didn't notice, but me and my colleague just stared at each other with a look of absolute horror. It still makes me shudder to think how close that baby was to hitting the deck head first. Never happened before or since. Well, just reading that took a couple of minutes off my life, I reckon. I didn't realize that women could fire off their offspring like missiles under the right circumstances. Is this more or less exclusive to C-section births, or can it happen during natural birth as well? When I was a new RN working the ICU in a large teaching hospital, I came into work one morning to a patient that was admitted during the night, intubated, like with a breathing tube in, and sedated, with a Foley catheter, a tube in their wee-wee hole, and everything like that. Long story short, we took the breathing tube out, called extubating, that same shift, and he was completely alert and oriented. He was an end-stage renal patient, meaning his kidneys didn't work and he needed dialysis, and was only in his late 30s. Said he never made urine anymore and didn't need the Foley catheter, so he wanted it out because it was hurting. Now, the catheter bag had been empty my whole shift, which is normal, seeing as how he didn't make urine anymore. And this hospital had a nurse-driven Foley removal policy, meaning while we needed a doctor's order to insert one, we could remove one at our discretion, unless a doctor specifically put in orders not to. This patient had no such doctor's order, so I went to remove the catheter. They're held in the bladder by a balloon on the end of it that's inflated with 10 milliliters of saline. I de-inflated the balloon, removing 10 milliliters of saline, and pulled it out. As soon as the catheter left his member, blood started pouring out in heavy streams. Turns out the nurse who placed it on admission hadn't advanced it far enough since there was no urine production to indicate correct placement, and then had inflated the balloon while still in his urethra, causing trauma. It wouldn't stop bleeding. I had to hold this man's eggplant shut to put pressure on it, while my coworker paged the resident who came and looked at me with pity as he told me to just keep holding this 30-something-year-old man's Johnson in my hands to staunch the blood flow until urology could get there to assess. It just kept gushing blood every time I eased up to check. For over an hour total, I held this man's grass snake and tried to make polite conversation until the urologist arrived. When I was younger, I had a rather complex external fixator, like a cage, applied to my leg. It had 3 rings, 2 large 360-degree rings around my leg, one in the upper middle of the shin, one on the lower, which had humongous rods to keep the cage fixed to my leg, and then a third one which was a horseshoe ring kind of thing around my ankle, which threaded all sorts of pins through my ankle, each pin set in a certain way. The point of this external fixator was to relocate and fix the positioning of my ankle so it wouldn't be so screwed, basically. I have a birth defect of clubfoot. A lot of bone got removed before the fixator was put on, so this way it could all grow. It was a 9-hour surgery, and my doctor, who I won't name, was pretty chuffed with himself after seeing it was all installed on my leg. That was until he looked closer. Those pins I spoke about before, with the numbers on them, almost like those sizing things on cheap coat hangers, were all colored and numbered, set for my dad to do every morning and night. He was looking at the pins and the numbers. He glanced away and looked back with a stressed face on. After a few seconds and a slight hand-on-head gesture, he whispered, "Crap." In his mind, he'd organized the pins in an incorrect way. He was stressed beyond his mind for a few minutes. He was worried he'd screwed everything up. Luckily, he hadn't. He just needed to move 1 or 2 numbers. 1 year later, 8 months after the frame was taken off, which was in for about 6 months, I ended up having my leg amputated. The surgery didn't work how we wanted it to, or at least how I wanted it to, which we were sort of expecting. The goal was to get me walking. The amputation got me running. Bear in mind, the amputation was my call. I was 12 when it was done. Best decision I ever made. 5th year resident here. There are lots of bad oh crap moments throughout training, such as necrotizing soft tissue infections or takebacks for bad complications, or deaths during cases. However, I'd like to share a recent positive oh crap moment. 15-centimeter kidney tumor with thrombus into the vena cava. Big incision, great exposure of the vasculature and the tumor. My attending and I are dancing around the aorta and vena cava. We're able to feel the tumor thrombus in the IVC. I was expecting that we'd need to cut and clamp the vena cava to get all the cancer out, but my attending literally squeezes the tumor out of the vena cava back into the renal vein and then has me tie the renal vein off so the tumor doesn't slip back into the vena cava. The patient went home in like 4 days. Margins were negative and they're still doing great. First time I felt like, oh crap, I'm a surgeon. Surgeon here. I've dealt with loads of morbid stuff, but one thing that made me stop and go, oh no, was a conversation with a young patient who had a perforated colon from a diverticular disease, which is common wear and tear of the colon. He was one of the youngest patients I'd seen with this condition, and certainly the youngest with a perforation so bad as to require an operation. When I was counseling him on the operation, which involves removing the perforated part of the colon and giving him a colostomy, he told me his biggest concern was how he was going to do it in the butt with his same-sex partner. He'd only have a small stump of rectum left inside, which would be at risk of perforation with any force applied to it. It really made me think about the implications of the surgery we do. The operation was the easy part. I was the patient. I had a liver transplant and was having an ERCP done to place a new bile duct stent. Well, apparently my anatomy is different than normal and my lungs go more down on my sides. So he accidentally caused a nick, which caused a hemothorax. So when I woke up, I couldn't breathe. They did an x-ray and had to do a chest tube. Eventually, I was so exhausted I asked to be vented, so he vented me. Apparently he cried. He felt so bad about it all. But it wasn't him being malicious or negligent, it was just an accident. My uncle is a respirologist and was supervising, sitting in on a lung surgery to remove a tumor. Turns out the tumor was a ball of roots. Some kind of seed had gotten into the patient's lungs and started to grow. Husband went in for a routine colonoscopy, and as they were prepping him, an anesthetist asks him if he's a ginger. My husband tells him, yeah. When he was a kid growing up, he had fire engine red hair, though it's faded to more of a strawberry blonde now. The anesthetist laughs and says, okay, gotcha, we'll give you the redhead dosage, and winks. Well, my husband thinks it's a funny, until he wakes up at the tail end of the procedure, pun intended, and the doctors are just chatting it up and what have you. Turns out it's not a joke and redheads have some kind of natural block to anesthesia. The guy had given him the max allowable dosage and he still woke up. It happened a couple of years later. They gave him ketamine and some other crap to knock him out to get wisdom teeth out when he told the dentist about the colonoscopy thing. He still woke up at the end of that one too. Okay, so now this video has traumatized every redhead who might have a surgery in the foreseeable future. At least now you're aware. Although, to be fair, the surgeons in this story were still aware and stuff really went awry anyway. Oof. When I was in pharmacy school, I was doing my internal medicine rotation in the final year. My preceptor and I were doing med reviews in the ICU when one of the pulmonary docs was basically like, hey, you want to see something cool? They were trying to extract a foreign object from a guy's lung in one of the rooms. So he went in and watched. About 6 people in the room, tube down the guy's throat, little grippers at the end. 2 doctors watching a monitor and trying to control the grabbers and get it like a claw game. I watched them for a bit, then after a while I lost interest and went back to what I was doing. Then a few minutes later I hear, got it, cheers from the room. Oh, it's a tooth. The guy aspirated his own molar. Doctor walked out with his trophy in a jar and it was completely intact, tooth root and all. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I heard an "oh no" moment as a patient on the operating table. A couple of years ago, I was in labor for 28 hours, pushing for 6, when my child started showing signs of distress. He had a slightly elevated heart rate and the makings of a fever. My midwife at the hospital told me the doctor was coming in to check to see if a vacuum assist could help. She checks me and immediately stands up with blood on her hand and says we're going to the OR now. At the time, I started feeling that zoomed-out tunnel vision, which I know for me is shock. I had anxiety, but figured she knew what she was doing. She did. We got to the OR 8 minutes later, then they opened me up. I heard the surgeon say, oh no, look at this. They saw blood in my catheter bag and upon fully opening me up found out my son was actually trying to come through my uterus. He had ruptured it. They got my son out. Those moments where he was stunned and not crying were an eternity. He cried and was born a completely healthy baby. After I woke up and was back in my room, the doctor came in and told me what happened. I knew a ruptured uterus sounded bad, but damn, I googled and started having a massive anxiety attack. A ruptured uterus is an extremely rare and so very dangerous and often fatal thing. I read from the time it happens, you have about 15 minutes before both parties are no longer alive. When I went back for my post-C-section follow-up, my midwife let me know, as a practice that's been around 35 years with over 30 midwives and doctors, they'd never once encountered that, and it was such a big deal for them a few days after my birth that they all got together to discuss my case. I was so incredibly fortunate I chose to go into labor in that hospital, that the doctor just knew from my vitals and baby that something was off. They just didn't know until they got me open. I can't even tell you how grateful I am for Dr. S. You saved my life and my son's life, and our family will forever be grateful. So this was a military dentist. Yes, they put me under and no insurance was involved. Not sure what they used for anesthesia. Anyway, wisdom teeth removal, all 4 impacted, got to break out the heavy hardware. I was knocked out. Didn't even know the dentist entered the room. I wake up, but unable to move. Just eyes open, awake, but my limbs won't react to my brain. I can feel the dentist hammering a chisel into my tooth to break it for extraction. My jaw is just coming undone on every hit. Yes, I could feel pain from the impact, but not nerve pains in the actual tooth. My eyes are wide open, jaw even wider with some evil metal contraption. I'm staring at the assistant, begging for her to see me, and after about a dozen hammers to my jaw, she glances over and drops the suction, jumps up and shrieks. The dentist stops to look at her, then looks at me and I see him say, oh crap. Next thing I know, I'm waking up post-surgery. That was the stuff that nightmares are made of. My "oh no" moment was 8 years after finishing medical school and deferring student loans through residency and fellowship, and then realizing that I was closer to 40 than 30 with over $200K in student debt. Just a resident nurse here, I was working in the ER and had a patient brought in by her husband. Apparently, the woman had fallen a week prior and injured her face, but refused medical care. Her husband finally forced her to come in. As soon as I see the wound on her face, from across the room, I think, that does not look like any wound I've ever seen. I approached her and realized maggots had infested the wound and were eating the rotten skin. A really simple and quick fix, but I can't imagine her living conditions. I had an ingrown toenail. It was supposed to be a quick fix. I was 14 and had my mum with me. They let an apprentice do the surgery and he just goes, oh no. The doctor in charge just laughed and said, no risk, no fun, right? Turns out they messed up my toe and I had to have 4 more surgeries to correct it. I cried. When I was in med school, there was an oh crap moment for everyone, including the surgeons, anesthetists, nurses, and students. They were prepping a patient for surgery and put him under, and the nurse said, okay, he's out. Before they were about to start slicing him open, the patient had just enough strength to look over and say, no, I'm not out yet. Everyone laughed it off, but if the patient hadn't done that, it could have ended so badly. I'm a scrub nurse. During a lab nephrectomy, urologist mistook the abdominal aorta for the renal artery, placed the staple gun on the aorta, did not wait the recommended 30 seconds before slicing, cut the abdominal aorta clean in half, patient immediately crashes, activate massive transfusion protocol, and the patient was somehow alive when they went up to the ICU. Definitely our worst, oh no moment. When I was a surgery intern, I was pulled from doing scut work to help out in a crap show of a case. One of our Professor Emeritus was in surgery and doing a simple liver biopsy on a patient and then nicked her hepatic artery. The biopsy was for a recurrent tumor and the patient had been on chemoradiation. What all that basically means is that the patient has a hole in a major artery and her tissue has the consistency of toilet paper. Every time they tried suturing the hole, the tissue just breaks apart, leaving a bigger, more leaky hole. Pretty much all hands were on board. The chief residents were scrubbed in, the seniors were literally squeezing blood bags into the patient's veins, and us interns were runners, going back and forth from OR to blood bank to transport blood and plasma. We ended up transfusing over 40 units, 12 liters of blood, so the patient lost over 2 times her total blood volume during that surgery. A vascular surgeon eventually swooped in and did a rather slick patchwork that fixed the problem. Even better, the patient was like a daughter to the surgeon. He had literally saved this patient's life several times already, and they got really close over the years. She'd even named one of her kids after him. The poor guy broke down a few times during the surgery and was convinced he'd just killed this lady. The chief residents had to take over a few times when he was just mentally not there. That was his final surgery. He retired the next day. Hell of a way to end a surgical career. Good God, that is indeed not a fun final day of work to have, and not a great lingering memory to fixate on when you presumably have decades of saving people in your past. I hope he got counseling. I work in cardiovascular, and I can think of a couple. In my 8-year career, I've had 3 patients start moving their arms in the middle of open-heart surgery. One of them even tried to sit up. The surgeon was literally pushing the patient's shoulders down and yelling for anesthesia to give the patient something. Another time, a simple pericardial window. For different reasons, sometimes patients can have extra fluid build up in the pericardial sac that surrounds the heart. The surgeon made a small hole and stuck the sucker in to suction the fluid out and to make room for the heart. He stuck the sucker in too far and struck it through the ventricle. Blood shot out of the small hole just below the sternum. He had to quickly open up the patient more under the ribs so he could stick his hand in to plug the hole with his finger. We had to call another surgeon in to help quick crash onto the heart-lung machine. During my 3rd year of medical school, I was stitching up the wound after surgery, and the anesthesiology nurse woke up the patient too early as I was making my last stitch, and I felt the patient moving her arm and trying to sit up. Patient was still covered in surgery draping and cables and still intubated. Luckily, most people don't remember much from the first moments after waking up, but I got quite nervous from the patient starting to move. Not a surgeon, but when I was in nursing school, I was observing a tonsillectomy when the power went out. Everything switched over to the backup generators except for the suction, which is incredibly important for any surgery, but particularly in the throat. There's an aspiration risk, you see. They ended up having to connect a giant syringe to a length of suction tubing to suction manually while someone went to the other side of the buildings to find portable suction. Luckily, ours was the only theatre that had started operating that morning. My mum had to have a kidney removed due to her waiting for almost 2 years to go to the doctor about a pain in her back. The doctors found it was a large kidney stone and that her kidney was infected and had lots of gross pus shutting it down. After draining the fluids through tubes over the course of a month and a half, she was finally ready for surgery. Cue last Wednesday, the day of the surgery. She was ready to be finally done with it. They removed the stent put in and the tubes no problem. Next was the kidney. And here comes the oh no moment. As they get ready to remove the kidney, there are complications. The kidney's infection had spread to a portion of her lung and a major artery, making them about as fragile as toilet paper. As the surgeon removed the kidney, a hole was torn in the lung, and even worse, the artery was severed. At that point, it was a race to save her life and stabilize her. I don't remember much about how they fixed her up there, but they had to fly her to a different hospital and have a heart surgeon fix the severed artery in a more permanent fashion. Anyway, the heart doctor saw the grave situation and said she's got a 1% chance for her to make it, but he did such an excellent job that my mum is still alive and getting stronger each day. The moral of this story is, if you have insurance and are experiencing pain, go to a doctor as soon as you realize it. It might save your life and also some doctors from an oh crap moment like this. Not mine, but my father's. He told me this back when I was 10, so I'm sorry if it doesn't fully make sense. He had a 21-year-old patient that needed to have a penectomy. He had cancer of the downstairs area. There were 2 oh crap moments for this. The first is a common thing. He wasn't fully asleep. The second, however, is funny and humiliating. They were about to start the surgery. Suddenly, one of the nurses that was there suddenly threw up and left. A test later, and boom! She got knocked up. Halfway through the surgery, the other nurse leaves for a call about her father. My dad's just standing there, a half-ruined manhood in his hand. He calls for help and is just standing there, a man's pride and joy in his hand for 30 minutes. I was having surgery on my chest to remove what they suspected was cancer. It was benign, but either way, I woke up during the surgery and I looked up and saw 4 people with scrub caps on staring down at me. I looked at my exposed mammary gland in pure horror, and that's all I remember because they knocked me back out. It still makes me want to chuck up just thinking about it. I was only 13. I was around 13 or 14 and undergoing gallbladder removal. Almost unheard of for someone my age to have gallstones bad enough to need one. But anyway, I was extremely underweight and sickly. The anesthetist gave me an adult dose of anesthesia and knocked me out for about 8 hours, when it took the surgeon about 40 minutes to complete my surgery, so there was a lot of panic that day because nobody could wake me up. And I was angry when I woke up because I couldn't feel my left arm with the IV in, and I really needed to pee. I tried to get up to go to the loo and ended up on the floor instead. They also got me a potty that I refused to use.